have you figured out any Play Store metrics that are particularly important when it comes to getting more downloads and having a higher ranking in the store itself? So for example, is the number of downloads important? Is it important that you have many keywords in your description? Are the ratings important to get higher in the list? Have you any insights on that?
Yeah, so two things. So what you mentioned about keywords is definitely...
Welcome to the Coding and Flow podcast. My name is Florian Walter, and in this show I interview interesting people from the programming industry to learn from them about software engineering, career development, and life in general. In this episode I interview Rob Joseph, or short Rob J, who many of you know from his developer podcast Coffee and Coding, which is also where I had my very first podcast interview, and this is what got me hooked and eventually motivated me to start my own podcast. Rob is an Android freelancer and indie app developer, and since 2012 he has released more than 20 of his own apps to the Google Play Store, some of which have gathered several hundred thousands of downloads and several thousand active users. And some of his apps even have been featured in big publications like Lifehacker, The Guardian, Yahoo, BBC News. And in this episode, we will talk about building and releasing your own apps to the Play Store. We will talk about topics like what kind of apps you should build if you want to have the highest chance of success and the highest chance of getting a lot of downloads in the Play Store. How to come up with ideas and if you should be worried that someone might steal your idea. We will talk a little bit about marketing and Play Store optimization, monetization strategies, how to avoid bad ratings and stuff like that. So it's a really interesting episode. In my opinion, every Android developer should have their own app on the Play Store because it's a great way to learn. It's great for your portfolio if you want to get found and hired by companies. And you can also make some money on the side if you do it properly. So I think this is interesting for every app developer, basically. So I wish you a lot of fun with this episode. So Rob, my first question is, how much coffee do you actually drink per day?
Oh, that's a very good question. All right, so right now the answer to that question is one. It used to be when Coffee and Coding came out, probably like 6. I'd get up at like 6 a.m. and I drink coffee from like 6 until 4. But then for whatever reason, like I suddenly started getting like so I was doing that for years, right? And then this past year I was getting really jittery and like my hands were shaking and I was like, I can't be coffee. And then I cut down to 1 coffee a day, which was really hard, and that all stopped. So apparently I've built up like an intolerance to coffee. So I haven't told anyone that because I feel like that would affect my brand. So right now I have 1 coffee a day and then I have like 5 decaf. So I still have 5 a day, but only one of them, gets me buzzing.
Yeah, I also used to drink a lot of coffee every day, but then I thought I don't want to be too dependent on caffeine, so I tried to stop for like 3 weeks, and then I thought I drink maybe caffeine twice or 3 times a week. But when I did this, and after I got completely off of caffeine, then it actually hit so hard that I could not sleep at night.
Yeah.
I tried it 3 times, and 2 out of these 3 times I couldn't sleep at night, even though I only drank a single cup in the morning. And I was wide awake 4 a.m.
Yeah.
And then I thought, if I'm not used to caffeine and it hits that hard, then I can't really use it anymore. So I stopped drinking coffee. But since recently I started taking a half of a caffeine pill, which is 100 milligram.
Yeah.
On some days. I don't want to take it every day because I don't want to get dependent on the caffeine. Yeah, I do it mainly because I'm a bit worried about how the coffee affects my teeth, because when you drink coffee every day, then it also can stain it.
Yeah.
And I'm a bit worried about this, so I opt for caffeine pills instead.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I mostly drink it because I like the coffee, not necessarily because I like the buzz. But I have thought about doing that as well. It's like if I needed a hit rather than having a whole cup of coffee, I could just take a pill. But I haven't gone that route yet. So.
And also what bothers me a bit is that coffee is actually acidic. This also means that like little bit like soda, even though it's not as bad, it can damage your enamel of your teeth, the enamel layer actually. So I'm a bit worried about this. But yeah, of course, if you enjoy coffee, then by all means, just drink coffee.
Yeah, I just have to take the risk. And to your point about sleep as well, like coffee literally changes the structure of your brain. So that's like getting off coffee. I've done it a few times where I have to like wean myself off from like 6 cups to 5 cups and eventually to none. But yeah, you get like caffeine headaches and all sorts of crazy stuff. And then yeah, when you get back to it, you have 1 cup of coffee and suddenly you're awake for like 3 days. So
yeah, you have to be really careful. And the tricky thing is also that there have been some studies that if people still have caffeine in their bodies when they try to sleep, they obviously sleep worse and they lose sleep quality, but they often don't notice it themselves.
yeah,
They sleep for the same time and they thought they slept very well, but they actually lost the equivalent of 1 hour or something like that because of the worse sleep quality.
yeah,
So I try to go not over 100 milligrams pretty early in the morning, which is, I think, about the equivalent of 1 cup of coffee, I think, or maybe 1.5, I'm not sure. But 200 milligrams of caffeine is actually already too much because from what I know, caffeine has a half-time of, and by the way, this is not a coffee podcast. I just want to touch on that
no,
quickly.
carry on.
I think caffeine has a half-life of, they say 4 to 6 hours. So when you take in 200 milligrams of caffeine, let's say 8 a.m., then around 4 or 3 p.m., you still have half of that in your system.
Yeah.
100 milligrams. And
Yeah.
then 5 hours later, you have again half of that, 50 milligrams. So by the time you go to sleep, when you take 200 milligrams in the morning, you still have about 25 or something like that in your bloodstream. And I think this can already be enough to damage your sleep. So if you just take 100 milligrams instead, then you get rid of this much faster. Because this half-life thing is the tricky part. It's not linearly removed from your body. It's just halving it every couple hours.
Yeah. Which is also like, so that's also depending on the person. So some people metabolize it much faster. But generally speaking, the half-life is the thing that screws you up because you're like, oh yeah, I drank coffee ages ago. But it's not like you said, it's not, you drink 100 and it goes down 10 milligrams an hour. That's not how it works. So.
Yeah. So, as said, I wouldn't go higher than 100 milligrams. That seems to be relatively safe. Yeah, and other than drinking coffee, what's your personal life like? Yeah, what hobbies do you have? Yeah, what do you do in your free time, basically?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. So hobbies-wise, I don't know I guess I have hobbies. So I build apps as work, but I also do it as a hobby. I do podcasting for fun. I work out. Like we've recently bought a house and kind of converted the garage into a gym. So now I can like go on my lunch break, which is really nice. And then outside of that, I don't know, really anything that involves computers and then anything that involves like some sort of physical exercise, but I'm not really into like team sports. So basically like weightlifting or some sort of cardio or something like that. And podcasting.
Yeah, I like weightlifting as well. I've always liked it. It has so much good effects on your body and you can do it relatively quickly.
Yeah.
And it makes you look better. It makes you feel better. It's good for your brain actually to build muscle.
Yeah.
I recently heard about that from some studies. So even cognitive decline in your age is reduced by just keeping your muscles strong.
Also, rate like how likely you are to die in old age is correlated with how much muscle mass you have. Because as you get older, it's harder to keep muscle. Yeah, they've done studies where the more muscle mass you have, the more likely you are to live longer. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So it's much more than just trying to look nice, right? It's really important for your health.
Yeah.
And from the sports I do, this has the highest priority for me. Weightlifting. It's just the best bang for the buck, basically.
100%. Yeah.
That you get back. Yeah. And I try to do cardio to stay fit, to keep my heart and everything healthy.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on the podcast a little bit later, but of course I will put a link to it in the show notes. So if people want to check it out, you actually have two podcasts, right? One
Yeah.
is Coffee and Coding, and
Yeah.
one is so the Coffee and Coding one is obviously about coding, about
Yeah.
programming,
Yeah.
and the other one is called Inside the Pod, which is like a meta podcast about podcasting itself
Yeah.
for people like me.
Yes. Yeah. The other one is a podcast about podcasting where I interview podcasters about how to do podcasting. So
Nice.
yeah, I tried to figure out a way that I could describe it with the word podcast as many times as possible. So
Yeah. And that's, of course, it's also very useful for yourself because it makes you a better podcaster while you interview these people.
yeah. Yeah, 100%. And also I get to meet like really cool podcasters and talk to them. And now like I know them. So if I have questions, I can just ping them a message, or, if I want something promoted, I could ask them and stuff. So yeah, it works out really nice.
Yeah, that's really the biggest benefit I've noticed from making a podcast myself, that you get in touch with so many interesting people.
Yeah.
And then you build completely different relationships than when you just write via text with them.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, the thing that I think about podcasting as well is that you have like, there's no other thing where you could do where you can message someone that you don't know and say, hey, would you just talk to me for an hour? Like nobody's going to say yes to that. But as soon as you say it's on a podcast, then suddenly everyone's like, yeah, we'll come. I'll talk to you for an hour, I'll talk to you for 2 hours. I'll come on 3 times. And then, like you said, then it's like you build this friendship kind of by accident.
Yeah, I noticed that all the people I talked with, even though I knew these people via social media and via direct messages over years, some of them, the relationship changes after you've really talked with them for an hour or two.
Yeah.
It just feels different afterwards. And how did you get into programming, and when did you start programming, and why did you go for Android?
Okay, cool. So I got into programming when I was in high school, which right now I'm trying to think how long ago that was. Probably, I don't know, like 15, 16, 17 years ago, something like that. And it was Visual Basic and I think maybe Pascal, like super old programming languages. And I just really liked it. And then I did, in the UK, you have A levels. So you have GCSEs, which is like your high school diploma. Then you have A levels, which is the next step after that. So I did computing for that. So again, more programming stuff, but nothing like I don't think there was anything object orientated. It was all like really old programming languages. And then from there, I did a degree in computer science, which was computer science with games development. Because when I was that age, I was like, I want to design games. And so I did that. I basically learnt no programming doing this degree, so I didn't turn up for most of the lessons. We had one module on Java across the whole 3 years, which I didn't know how to do Java. I just knew how to do the exam. And then when I finished that, I got a job as an IT consultant, which was for a big company. And essentially all that means is they put you on whatever project they want you to put you on, and it might be building something or it might be tech support. So I did tech support for some big websites for maybe 6 months. I did I built a couple of projects for some like government company contracts that they had. But I knew from the first week that I started that job that I didn't want that job. Like I knew that this is not the thing for me. I hate this. I don't want to do it. But I was also had this thing in my head where you get told as you grow up, if you don't like a job, you can't just quit, because when you go to your next employer, they're going to be, why did you quit your last job? And if you say, I quit because I didn't like it, then they might think to themselves, well, if you didn't like that job, if you don't like this job, you're going to quit. So we're not going to hire you. So I had this thing in my head where it's like, I have to stay for a certain period of time before I can quit, so that when I go for the next job, it won't look so bad. So I did that I think I was there, in my head it's like 18 months, but I think if you calculate, it was probably like 14 or 13 or something, just over a year. And during that time, I was at work, I was on this support contract, so I was working support for this website. And if nothing goes wrong with this website, I have nothing to do. But because it's in a corporate environment, I have to pretend that I have something to do, so that when people go past, I have to look busy, right? Like you gave me no work, but when you walk past, I have to pretend that I'm doing something that you haven't told me to do. So I basically, I read so I was like browsing the web, and I read an article on Lifehacker that said, the title of the article was something like the best to-do list, and it was essentially a feature list of everything they would want from a to-do app. And so I read this and I was like, oh, this is great. If I build this to-do app, it has everything anybody could ever want. They've said this is what they want. I'm going to make $1 million. I'm going to sell this. I'm going to message Lifehack and say like, I built this app that you talked about. And so I started to learn Android from there, primarily because I had an Android device at that time. That was the only reason I chose Android. If I had an iPhone, I might have been writing iPhone apps right now. So I started to do that, and I was basically just, Googling, how do I make a list? Okay, put a list into my app. How do I do this thing? Okay, and basically I started to do it. It was horrible. Like, for people that are listening or watching that are Android developers, my list in this to-do app was not like a list view or recycler view. It was a loop that would manually draw out linear layouts in a big linear layout with...
That's basically Jetpack Compose.
Yeah. But yeah, it was basically Jetpack Compose, except with the fact that it didn't work, because if you get to like 100 items on that list, the app would just crash. It would not scroll anymore. But that's what got me into it. And then I basically just started building apps that I wanted to use. So, I would have an idea and I'd be like, my phone, I really wish my phone did this thing, and it doesn't. So let me see if I can build an app to do this thing. And I did. And then I would release it because I was like, well, maybe somebody wants to use it. And then kind of I got a little bit lucky from there, and it turns out people did want to use some of them. But that was kind of the journey into Android, and that's kind of where it evolved from. So
yeah, this was also a question I had noted down for later, how you come up with app ideas. And from looking at your apps, it already seemed like you built apps around your own problems, basically.
Yeah, 100%.
Like you have also an app called Coffee Working, which lists coffee shops from where you can work, right, nearby. And yeah, it looked to me like this was something you would yourself be interested in as a coffee drinker. And this is also the best approach to go about app ideas, I think, to choose a problem that you have yourself.
Yeah.
Not only because this way you know that this is a problem that actually exists, but also because you can then yourself see if this actually solves your problem in a way that's useful.
Yeah.
I think if you try to build an app around the problem that you don't have yourself, then it's easy to miss the actual solution and just go for nice, shiny features, but it's not actually useful to the people who want to solve their problem.
Yeah.
So I think this is the best approach to go about this. And so you studied computer science in university, but you said the same that most people said who studied computer science, that it wasn't really practical, it didn't really teach you how to build an app, right? Would you still say that it's worth it in hindsight, or would you pick something different, or would you not study at all? What would you do?
That's a great question. I think it depends, right? If we're talking primarily about programming, be it Android or iOS or web, whatever, I would 100% say don't go to university. I would say don't do any formal qualifications. Get a course on Udemy or go on YouTube or follow however you learn best. Some people learn best from videos. I personally learn best by just trying to do stuff. So how do I do a list? I'll Google Android, how do you do a list? And I'd find a tutorial for that, and I'd figure that bit out, and then I'd figure out the next bit, and eventually you learn all the things. But I'm not a huge for software engineering. I am not a huge fan of formal education, because I think it's not, depending on where you are in the world, it's not cheap. In this country, it's not cheap. In America, it's even more expensive. I know some countries it's free, so there is that option. But two, I've never seen any formal education that is up to date. So the stuff that you learn is actually something you could then go and take out into the next role, because you'll get there and they'll be like, we don't do this anymore, or we haven't done this for 5 years. So there's that. And also I feel like it takes too long. Like you could get to Android kind of junior mid-level status in 6 months by just building stuff on your own, and you'd have a portfolio of stuff that you've built. So you could go to somebody, and rather than say I have a degree, because even the jobs that I've hired on, I've never looked at somebody's CV and been like, have they got a degree? I don't care if they've got a degree. I care about, do they have experience? And if they don't have experience, do they have things that they can show me that they've done, so I can say like, yes, they can do this or not. So in terms of formal education, I'm not a huge fan. The only thing, like obviously if you want to be a doctor, then go to university. You don't really have an option to like go online and learn it, because that's not a good way to...
For Udemy.
Yeah, that's not how you do
to do heart surgery.
Yeah, nobody's going to hire you from that. And then also there is also the social aspect. So if you want that social aspect, then 100% go and do a computer science degree. You're not going to lose anything by doing it. But if you don't want to spend that time and you don't want to spend that money, I'm all about just learn stuff for yourself, or get a Udemy course, go on YouTube, however you want to do it.
Yeah, I like how Philipp Lackner did it, who was also on this podcast. He is from Germany like me, and here studying is basically free. You just have to pay some small fees, but other than that, it's not like in the US. Even though I don't completely understand how the difference between this works, why it's over there so expensive and why here it's free. I guess it's because of taxes that people pay. It's paid from that, I guess. But what he did is he also studied computer science, but he had a lot of free time because he didn't go to every class, because he knew that he is faster at teaching this stuff himself at home. But he used his free time to build his Instagram account and build his YouTube channel and everything. So he was really smart with his time. And this is what I would do in hindsight if I could go back in time. I would study computer science because in some jobs it's still necessary or at least very helpful to have this degree. But I would try to be smart about how I approach this and not try to feel productive by going to these lectures that I don't really actually need. Yeah, and yeah, you also said, or you also mentioned the social part. And yeah, that's also what Philip said, that university is a good way to find like-minded people, which can also be useful. Maybe you find people that you can build a project with or just network, and who knows what opportunities rise out of that. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the apps you have on the Play Store.
Sure.
Because people send me a ton of questions. And also I have a lot of questions about having your own apps on the store. First of all, maybe you want to talk about the most successful apps you have. What kind of apps are those? What functionality do they have? And yeah, what do they basically do? You have several apps, so you don't have to explain all of them. Maybe you just go through your most successful ones.
Yeah, sure. So there's two that were easily the most successful. One is still on the Play Store, one is not. So the first app ever that I built after I made this horrible to-do app that I never released because it just didn't work, was called Read It To Me. So it was basically what I mentioned before, right? I build apps that I want to use. So my kind of use case was basically I was on the London Underground to go to this job that I didn't like, and I got my headphones in because I'm listening to music or a podcast or something, and you're all like squashed in and you can't really move, and I'd get a text message from somebody but I can't read it, right? And I've got like another 30 minutes on my journey and I want to read this message, or my phone will just keep vibrating because I'm getting loads of messages and I'm like, is it an emergency? Is something going on? So I basically wanted an app where I've got my headphones in and I just want it to read me my messages. And so I figured out how to do it, and I built this app that would read my messages. And I wanted things like, I don't want to have to keep turning it on. So when I plug my headphones in, I want it to turn on. And when I unplug my headphones, I want it to stop reading me messages. So I built this thing. I posted it on XDA Developers, which was, I think it's still there. I don't know how big it is, but back in the day, that was like one of the big Android sites. And I was like, hey guys, I built this thing, here's the APK if you want it. And, a few people downloaded it and they started asking me for features, can you get it to do this? Can you get it to do that? So I released it on the Play Store for free, and I had like a pro version, because back in the day, you didn't used to have like freemium. You would have like a light version of your app, and then you'd have another separate version, which was the pro version with more features. And I think in 1 year, it did like 5,000 downloads, right? Which sounds like a lot, but considering most of those downloads are free, maybe I made $10 from the whole thing, right? So it's not a lot, really. But that app is still on the Play Store today, and I rewrote it a year later because, as anybody who's listening who is a software engineer, the code you wrote a year ago is always horrible. So, do it again. I've probably rewritten it like 5 times now every time something new comes out, but that one's still on the Play Store and it still generates money and people still use it and I still use it. So that's probably one of the biggest ones. And then secondary to that was an app that I released that was called Floatification. So I think it was 2013. That's when Facebook first came out with chat heads. So, you get a Facebook message, it shows a little avatar on your screen and you can like swipe it around and you touch it and it shows you the message and then you can open it. And I was like, it'll be one was I wanted to find out how they did it because it appeared over every app. So I figured out how they did it. And then I was like, it'd be really cool if I could do this for all my notifications. So, I get a WhatsApp and it just pops up a little bubble on the screen and, you can customize it and you can move it around and you could eventually reply. So I built that and I posted it on XDA Developers, like a video. I think it's still out there, which is this horrible video of just a home screen with a little Android man on it and I move it around with my finger, and I had a caption on it that was like, would anybody be interested in this? And everyone was like, yes, this is amazing. So I think across a weekend, I built like a really basic version of this app and I released it on XDA developers, right? So I took the APK file, I just posted it as a forum on the forum as like a file. And I was like, here it is. And it got something like 40,000 downloads because places obviously found it and they started writing about it. And it was like, you could only get it from here. So I was like, all right, cool. People are interested in this. So, I tidied it up. I added some features. Eventually, I released it onto the Play Store. And I think in the first 2 weeks, it did 100,000 downloads. And I don't know how much money it made, but it probably made like a few $1,000s or a few £1,000. So I was like, okay, this is cool. And obviously, that sounds cool, but what you forget is that initial surge of users is probably all the users that were going to find it, because I'm not a big marketing guy. So, I get my money, these guys get their app, and then nobody else is going to find this app. And it's not like you get $1,000 a day or something. So they were probably my two biggest successes, but Floatifications isn't available anymore, primarily because I stopped doing development on it, because it got to a point where, one, I was bored of doing development on it because it did everything I wanted to do, and two, it worked. And then other apps came along doing the exact same thing, but they were building more features into their apps and they were doing more stuff. And at some point it was just like, well, people were messaging me saying, can my app do this and can my app do that? And I would just direct them to these other apps because I was like, these ones are way better. They're maintained. They're shiny and new. So eventually I just took it off the Play Store.
So, of course, I will put a link to these apps into the show notes,
Sure.
where people can find them. And you build all your apps by yourself?
Yes. Yes, I built all my apps by myself, apart from Coffee Working, which you mentioned. There is an iPhone version, which one of my friends, we built that together. So I built the Android, he built the iOS.
Yeah, but you were pretty early when you did this, right? This was a few years ago. Do you think today it's still realistic that people have the same kind of relatively quick success with a relatively simple app that they built alone? Do you think it's still realistic today?
Yes, I think because it wasn't a fluke. Basically, what I figured out from doing this is that the whole thing with everything, right, is you need to get your app in front of users and you need to build something that they want. Because if you put it in front of users and they don't want it, that's a waste of time. And if you build it for users, but then they can never find it or they don't know it exists, then you've also wasted your time. And so the way that I did Floatifications, like, that was a bit of a fluke because it got a bunch of press because it was so popular on XDA before I had messaged anybody saying, hey, do you want to write about this thing? But things like Read It To Me was me messaging, Fandroid and Android Police and saying like, hey, I have this app, it does this thing. If you're interested in writing about it, go for it, basically. And them writing about it, and then other people who read those websites finding it. So I think, yes, but it all depends. If you have something that people want, then you just have to get it in front of them. Luckily for me, all the apps that I built, for the most part, like excluding Coffee Working, are apps that are exclusively for Android users, but they add some functionality to your phone. So it's not like a game where if you're not into this type of game, you don't want it. Or, I don't know, Uber, where if you never go anywhere, you don't need the Uber app. These are things where if you want your phone to do something extra, then these are the apps that you could use, and then it opens up the audience to basically everybody that reads Android Police, etc., etc. So then you have a good chance of getting your app found and downloaded. And if it's good, people will use it and pay for it. And if it's not good, then they won't.
Yeah, I think many people are worried that today you have to build a huge, complex app to be successful on the Play Store.
Nope.
You can still get along with a relatively simple
Yeah,
app.
because if you think about it, like all the apps that you have on your phone, you don't judge if you're going to use this app by how complex it is. You judge, am I going to use this thing based on what does it do? So, I have an app on the Play Store right now that's free. It makes me no money. It's called Super Simple Sleep Timer. And it was, again, I wanted this app where I wanted to be able to listen to a podcast while I was going to sleep, and I wanted to be able to set a sleep timer, and after 30 minutes, it would stop playing. And the podcast app at the time that I was using didn't do this. So I built an app that would basically, anything that's playing on your phone, it would just put it to sleep. And I released that, and I messaged Lifehacker, and I was like, hey, I released this app. They posted about it. I think it was probably like 2015, something like that. And right now, I don't know how many downloads it has, but I know it has something like 25,000 active users. And that app is super simple, really small amount of code. It does one thing, that's all it does, and people still use it. And there's other sleep timers out there that do way more stuff, and people still use them too. But it's really about not how complex the thing is. It's about, does it do the thing that people want it to do? And however it does it, as long as it works, the rest of it does not matter.
Yeah, another way people express this worry is that they think that at least all the simple problems are solved already. They think that there is nothing left to build an app around, at least not from the relatively simple problems that you can solve with a simple app. But you still find ideas for smaller apps, like your super simple sleep timer. But this was also already a few years ago, right?
Yeah.
Do you think today there are still these problems that can be solved with relatively simple apps? But I guess you already answered that.
I think, yeah. I can kind of see where you're going, and I can see where people are going. And I think, to me, it's like everything else, right? So, for example, like Florian, you, for example, right, have a podcast now, and you could have not started your podcast and said, there's already podcasts about what you're doing, so I'm just not going to do that because people listen to that. But people might not want to listen to those. They might want to listen to your podcast instead, or they might want to listen to your podcast as well. And I think apps is the same thing. Like, I have an app right now, that Sleep Timer app. It does one thing. Somebody could go out and spend a day and, a couple hundred lines of code and build the exact same thing and release it. And nobody's going to go on the Play Store and be like, I only want Rob's app. They're going to go on the Play Store and they're going to type in Sleep Timer. And if your app pops up and they click on it and it works, then they're going to use your app. Like, it's not like a loyalty thing, right? Like, there's big companies like Lyft and Uber. If you write one of those apps, it's very unlikely if somebody searches for, car sharing rides and they see Uber or they see, Rob's magical car journey app, they're going to click my one. But for everything else, nobody's tied to those things. So you could go and build it. Maybe they use it. Maybe they don't. Like, probably don't, bet all of your money on someone downloading your Sleep Timer app. But it doesn't mean that you can't do it and have success.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I noticed myself that there are some apps that I have that are just 80% perfect for me, where I would like to have some other features or a little bit of different behavior. So I think, I'm still open for new apps, even for stuff like to-do lists where there are already a lot of apps. Like I remember that I was searching for a to-do list that showed the progress on a task in form of a progress bar, but I couldn't find anything. So this was something, if someone had built it at that time, I would probably use their ones, if it was solid enough. And do you know how many lines of code roundabout your apps have? An app like Read It To Me or
Read It To
your
Me
Sleep Timer?
is, so super simple sleep timer is, I don't know how many, but I can tell you off the top of my head, it's probably like 10 files and probably a couple thousand lines of code altogether. It's really not a lot. Read It To Me is a lot of code. It's not a huge project, but there's a lot of moving parts because you have to write. So one, there's the whole like a service that reads the messages and queues them up and make sure that it reads them properly. Then you have a whole voice reply section to do that. Then you have, because there's so many options, you have, different like manager classes to manage, if they've picked this option, then this is the text that we need to send to read. And if they've pressed this option, then you have all the UI stuff. So it's a little bit complicated. It's probably more lines of code than it needs to be. But at this point, I'm not going to rewrite the whole thing again. So, it is what it is. But in terms of code, like, it's the initial version. I think every single app I've released, apart from Coffee Working, the first version that was on the Play Store took 1 weekend to build. So that's not a huge amount of code. And then adding features on top is what adds code. And then obviously you end up with like legacy code and stuff like that. But generally speaking, they're not very big apps at all, no.
And these days you're using Kotlin, I assume.
Yeah.
Is there any Java left in your projects, or is it all Kotlin now?
No, there's still Java. Read It To Me definitely has Java. I started to convert the big complicated portions of the app to Kotlin because it makes it much easier to like read and figure out what's going on, especially if you don't look at your app for a year and then you have to go and update it to the new Android version. So there's that. And then in terms of Java, there's still Java stuff which I haven't changed because if it works, there's no reason to do it. If I went back to change it, if it's a really big class and I have to change one thing, I won't convert it. But if it's relatively simple code, I'll definitely convert it to Kotlin, because that makes it much easier to change going forward. But yeah, there's definitely a good mix in there.
Yeah, makes sense. You have several apps, so do you think it's better to go wide and have many different apps to make money from it? Or do you think it could also make sense to focus on a single app and just put all your effort and time into a single one? What do you think is the better approach?
So, good question. I think if you're looking to make money from apps, then I don't know if I have a good answer. So I can tell you that I've spoken to people who have like Luke Klinker, who's got the Klinker Apps company, and they've got a bunch of different messaging apps and Twitter apps and stuff. And I spoke to Zhao, who builds the Tasker app, and they have like essentially one app, and then like Klinker Apps has variations of the app, so you can buy 15 different versions. So you're only ever going to use one, but if you go on the Play Store, it will look like there's all these different competing versions when really they're all under the hood the same thing. And then Zhao only really does Tasker, and I think he's got one other one. But I think if you're looking to make money, you want to pick probably one thing. You want to hit like whatever that thing is you're trying to solve. You want to hit that. You want to make sure that you get it in front of people that want that problem solved, and then you want to build what they want you to build on top of the app, and then kind of take it from there. I think the other option is to build lots of different apps and just get really small income streams from all of them. But really, it just depends what you're doing. Like, I only build apps that I want to use, so I don't really build apps with the intention of I want to make money. And if people want to pay for them, that's great. And if they don't, they don't. But it's fine. That's not my income. I think if you want to do it so that you make money, you probably want to, even if you're going to have a lot of apps, you want to pick one at a time and get that to wherever it is you want to get to, whether it's $100 a month or $1,000 a month or whatever. And then, if you get one to $100 a month and you want to build something else, you can do that and have two income streams. But I think definitely focus on one at a time if that's your goal.
Yeah, at the moment I focus on a single app because to a big part, I have this app because I want to use it for learning purposes, and I want to do everything properly. So I really write a lot of tests for it, and I try to optimize the code and keep it clean and everything. So I really focus a lot on this one app, but monetization is not my main priority. So this is why this works for me. And this is also just something I wanted to mention again, that having your own app on the Play Store, apart from making money, is just a really nice way to learn how to do it properly.
Yep.
And it's more fun, in my opinion, than just going through tutorials and building these prepared tutorial projects.
100%. And it has the added bonus of building portfolio. So if you did want to get a job doing, Android or iOS or whatever, it's always much nicer to go onto your CV. Like, if you go to this link, I have 5 apps on the Play Store or the App Store, as opposed to, I've just qualified from university and I can do what you want me to do, but I don't really have any proof that I can do it. So
yeah, and Rahul Pandey, who was also on my podcast recently, also told me he works at Facebook, and he told me that if you actually put your app on the Play Store, you actually have a bigger chance of getting noticed by a recruiter than just having it on GitHub.
Yeah, to that point, literally, I get an email from Facebook at least once a year saying, am I interested in hiring, like, am I interested in doing the interview process? And that all started because of floatifications. Like, about a week after it came out, I got an email from someone at Facebook saying, hey, we saw you did this app, we think it's really cool, would you like to come and interview to work at Facebook? And every year since then, I get at least one email a year saying, like, are you interested now? Are you interested now? So it definitely does help to get you noticed as well. Yeah.
That's really nice, because this is the dream of many people, to land into one of these FAN companies, or I guess now it's called Manga and not FAN anymore.
Yeah.
Because Facebook changed their name to Meta.
Yeah, I saw that. I assume they changed the parent holding company name, right? Like, Facebook is still Facebook.
Yeah, not the product itself, but the parent. And now the acronym is Manga for these big tech companies.
Nice.
Okay, you already touched a bit on app monetization, but you only talked about the monetization back when you started, right? Where you had a free version and a premium version. Those were separate entries in the Play Store, if I understand this correctly.
Correct, yeah.
And these days, do you still monetize your apps? And what do you think are the best ways to do this? And what do you think about ads versus in-app purchases, which one do you prefer? Or what's the benefits and downsides of these different ways of monetizing your app?
Yeah, good question. So I personally have never done ads in my apps. I've looked at doing ads in my apps. I remember when I looked at it, it didn't seem like it was a very lucrative business, because the amount of money you get paid to show one ad is basically less than a penny or a dollar, or less than a cent, depending where you're listening. So you have to get a lot of volume on ads being shown to make it worth your while. So if you have an app that has 100,000 users and you can show them one pop-up ad a day, then you can probably monetize really well from that. But other than that, the way that I've always monetized my apps and what I do now is just like freemium model. So you have the app, it's got free features, it has other features that are paid. So if they want to pay for that, they can subscribe. I always do subscription now, because I realized that when you're an independent developer, what I used to do is one-time purchase, right? So you can purchase, the unlocker or whatever for this app forever. And the problem being that unless you have a huge volume of users coming through your app consistently, once all of the people that use your app have paid for your app, that's all your income. Like, that's it. That's the amount of money. If you've got 1,000 users and they all paid $1, the only amount of money you're ever going to get from them is $1,000, which sounds like a lot until you realize that they've paid for this thing and they're expecting you to support it indefinitely, forever, essentially. So in 5 years' time, you make no money from this app, but you still have to update it to new libraries and you still have to add features. And so I basically switched to the subscription model, which is people pay for continuous use of the app, which then in turn funds the development of the app. So you don't feel like you're just working for other people for free. So I highly advocate like in-app purchases and the freemium thing. I also advocate that give people all my apps that have paid features, you get a 2-week trial when you install the app of those paid features with no limitations. And it says up front, you're going to get a 2-week trial, tells you when it's finished and says your 2-week trial is finished. When you go to like enable features, it has a little label on there that says, this is a paid feature, but it works during your trial. Not those words, it's much more concise than that, but essentially that's what it says. So when someone's using the app, they understand, right, this is what I get for free, this is what I'll get if I pay. And my thinking being that once it gets to 2 weeks, if they've been using the paid features and they like it, they will pay for the paid features. And if they didn't like the features or they haven't been using them, then they won't pay for them. So they understand what they're getting, as opposed for you asking for their money and them hoping that they get what they expect to get.
Yeah, I think many people use ads first because they are the easiest to add, basically. Just add a banner and that's it. Although I have to say it's not that simple, because you also have to then have a more elaborate privacy policy, for example. And Google is putting more attention on that lately. Soon, I think it will be required to actually have a privacy policy, which was not required in the past, I think.
It's already required, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
It's already required. And yeah, I have one, and my privacy policy is like 2 lines of text, because right now I don't have anything in there that's really about...
My privacy policy is one that I copied and pasted from somewhere about 5 years ago and just changed the name of the app.
Yeah, that's how many people do it.
Yeah.
There are also some generators out there that can create one for you. Yeah, so you prefer subscriptions, basically. And many software companies go into this direction of subscriptions these days, because it just seems to be more profitable. For example, I use Adobe Premiere for video editing, and since recently I also have After Effects, and you can't get them for a single time fee anymore. You have to get a subscription.
Yeah.
And the weird thing about this is that, so as soon as you get, I think, 2 of their programs, it's basically cheaper for you, or at least it has the same price if you just get the whole cloud.
Yep.
So then I pay, I think, 50 or 60 euros per month, and I can use all their programs, and they have a ton. And the weird thing about this is that it feels cheap, because I can see all these different tools that I now have available. But if you think about it, it's actually quite expensive, because basically every month I'm paying the price, or maybe half the price of this program would have had in the past if it was a one-time purchase. So they're really draining a lot of money out of me to keep using that. But I mean, I get updates and everything, so it's worth it. And it's fair.
Yeah, as long as you get continuous use from it, it's fair. And to that point, also, that's great marketing on their point, because that's what everybody does, right? If you look at we're using Riverside, and they'll have, 3 different tiers, but they only want you to get one tier unless you really need the top tier. So they'll make the bottom tier and the second tier quite close. So then it's like, well, why would I not just pay $1 more and get this one? And it's the same thing. Like, why would I not just pay a bit more and get all of the programs, even if I don't need them, because I feel like I'm getting more for my money?
Yeah, there are a lot of these pricing psychology strategies that can make a big difference.
Yeah.
Price anchoring and stuff like that, where you have a cheaper one, but it's not really worth it, so it brings people to the middle one.
Yeah.
And this is often the one that's also highlighted when you are on the website. This is what people prefer. Yeah, you also said that it's kind of annoying to have to keep working for free if people buy your app for a single time purchase, and then they can use it indefinitely, and you have to keep making updates for it. And yeah, I can also see how this can be demotivating if you know that there is not really a stream of money coming in, but you still have to work for this app and keep making updates.
100%.
And I can see how really this can hurt your motivation to keep working on it.
But that's also the upside of that, is if you build stuff that you want to use, then it's like I'm working for myself because I'm building it, and then I'll release it because I know other people are using it. But yeah, if I had an app like Floatifications that I didn't want to maintain anymore, and I wasn't making any money from maintaining it, then it's then having to work on that for free for money that I got paid 5 years ago doesn't seem like it's worth it.
And can you give an example of an in-app purchase or of a difference between, or a feature that someone gets in one of your apps when they buy the premium version? Do you have an example for that?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So Read It To Me has always been that it will read your text messages for free, but if you want it to read WhatsApp or Signal or anything else, you have to pay for that feature. And that was mostly because when I started the app, which is like 2011, 2012, there was a really hacky way to get access to other notifications. And because I went through the trouble of doing that and no one else was doing it, I was like, well, this is a cool paid feature because nobody else has got an app that will read your WhatsApp message. They've only got apps that would read SMS because that's the only thing that Android gives you to be able to read. But I just carried on because people are willing to pay for it. I think I've either changed it or there's an update that hasn't been out yet where I changed it to you get 3 apps for free. But if you want more than 3 apps to be read, then you pay. So basically you have to kind of figure out what it is that users want and kind of where that line is, because you don't want to alienate people that actually want to use the app because you want the money, unless obviously that's your whole revenue, then maybe you do, I don't know. But for me, it's like I want people to pay for the maintenance of the app and for stuff that I'm giving them, but I don't want them to have to pay for stuff that they should get for free. But yeah, so for that app, it was that. For Floatifications, I'm trying to think. I'm pretty sure it was 100% paid app. So you'd get a 2-week free trial and then you'd have to pay for the unlocker. So that was like the whole app was essentially premium, but I had it on the Play Store for free so people could try it, because it's a lot easier to get people to pay for stuff if they've tried it than having it on the Play Store and they have to buy it to find out what it's about. So that would be 2 examples of that, yeah.
Yeah, I guess you have to be careful where you draw the line between the free and the premium version, because there are also situations sometimes where people start adding bad votes to an app or bad ratings, because they are, the too many of the important features are in the premium version.
Yeah.
One example that comes to mind for me right now is the password manager I'm using, which is LastPass. And many people were complaining because, or even outraged, because they what they changed, I think, is that you can only use it on one kind of device right now, but they didn't do that in the past. So now I can only use it on the PC or on my phone if it's the free version. And this is an example for a situation where people felt like this was too much to ask for, I guess. And there are other apps that you can basically use for free indefinitely, and you never really need the premium version, which I guess is also not great, because then you have too few people that actually buy the premium version.
Yeah.
For example, I use MyFitnessPal, this app to count, to track your food and count calories. I've been using them for so many years, and I never even felt close to buying the premium version because I have all the features that I need available. Maybe they should be a bit, they should move a bit of the free stuff into the premium version to make more money, but I guess it works for them.
Yeah, I mean, I assume it works for them, but yeah, it's exactly that. You have to find the balance, and also, to your point, you can't, at least from my perspective, you can't take features away from users that were free and expect them not to complain. So it's a lot easier if you start out, if you can't figure out what should be free and what should be paid, just make most of it paid, because users will appreciate getting new features for free as opposed to, oh, I used to be able to use this thing and now you want me to pay $2 a month. Why would I do that? Because they've already had that free experience. So yeah, that's the only thing that you have to think about, is you can't really take stuff away from users once it's out there. So you have to figure out kind of off the bat what you want to be free. And if you can't, then I would just suggest make as much of it paid as you're comfortable with, and then start giving stuff back for free when you realize where that kind of stands, because that's the best way to combat it. But yeah, I'm sure MyFitnessPal is doing absolutely fine, but it is one of those things where this is also where you have to look at analytics and be like, what is it that people are using, especially on the free thing? Because if you've got paid users and they never use this feature, maybe you put that feature out for free so you have more things that you can say you offer, because your paid users are not using it anyways. But yeah, you can't go back, or you shouldn't go back. It just results in bad reviews. So
yeah, those are good points, especially the one point that you should not take features away that used to be free, because this is what really tends to make people angry.
Yeah.
But generally, I'm really a fan of these freemium apps, or of this freemium approach, because when you can use it for free and you really get invested in an app.
Yeah.
If you keep using it, and then it becomes a no-brainer to pay these $5 or $5 a month, maybe, if you really like the app and if it's really useful to you and you need these additional features, then the barrier is much lower than if you have never used this app before and you have to pay for it right away. It's a world's difference.
Also, on that point, if you have an app that's paid, like has freemium, and like you only ever use the free features, a really good tip to convert those users to paid users is to send them a notification saying, hey, for the next 10 days, you can get 12-month subscription to this app half price. Because if they want any of the paid features, they will take up that subscription, and hopefully in a year's time, they won't cancel it and it goes back to the regular rate. But I always found for Read It To Me, that worked really good to convert free users to paid users, was just by offering them a discount. And I would always do it on like the holidays. So, Christmas discount, here's 50% off, or Happy Thanksgiving, here's 50% off. So all that kind of stuff as well.
And when you want to do subscriptions or in-app purchases, do you always have to use Google's own integration of that, or can you circumvent this and charge for a subscription via other means outside of the app?
So I'm not entirely clear on this. So I've only ever used Google IAPs, but I know that there was a whole thing recently with I forget the name of the company, really big company that does games, and they, on the Apple App Store, they got banned for a period of time because they were circumventing Apple payment stuff, and I think that's a whole court case going on. And then on Android, I can't remember where that ended up. I feel like I read a thing the other day that says they don't make you use it, but I don't know for sure. I only use IAPs only because it's just the easiest thing to drop in, at least historically it was. I don't know about now.
Yeah, I think Epic is the name of the...
Yeah.
And how much do you have, or how much of a split do you have to give to Google when you have in-app purchases? They just recently lowered it, right?
They recently lowered it to, so it used to be 30%, and then they lowered it to 15%, but you had to opt in to get the lower rate. So rather than just give everybody 15%, you had to like click the link and then go to the next bit, fill out something and say, yes, I would like you to take less money from me. So that was crazy. But yeah, so I think right now it's 15%. Which is a good portion of money, but it just depends. If you can use other things and you want to do that, then go for it. If I could use Stripe, for example, I would do that. But I just feel like for what I'm like, one, making the money is not my priority with the app, so it's just nice income. And two, it's much easier to manage things like subscriptions, especially for users. It's all in the Play Store now, so they could just go and see, I'm subscribed to all these apps and cancel it, as opposed to you getting angry reviews or angry emails saying, why do you keep taking $5 a month from me and how can I cancel it? So
yeah, I also had to go through this process to apply for these 15%, even though my app is not monetized yet, but I did it. But I think they seem to be doing it because they want to make sure that your Play Store account is not affiliated with another account that is already above the threshold to not
Something like
be
that,
applicable anymore,
Yeah.
I think. Because 15% is only for the first $1 million or something like that.
Yeah, then
Is
it
that
goes
right?
up. Yeah.
So yeah, in this questionnaire, I think they want to make sure that you don't already have another account where you're over this threshold. I guess this is their justification
I guess
for
they're
that.
trying to like aggregate it, right? If you have one account that's 500,000 and one that's 500,000, then they would aggregate that and say, well, you're over the million now.
And we haven't talked about numbers yet. I don't know if you want to say how much these apps are making, but you can also maybe just describe it. Would the income from your app be enough to not work anymore?
Nope. I can tell you exactly, well, I can't tell you exactly because I don't know, but I can tell you roughly speaking, the only app that I have on the Play Store now that makes money, and I think is also the only one that has paid features, is Read It To Me, and that makes me about £200 a month. So it is enough to fuel my coffee addiction and like a couple of dinners out. It is not enough to stop working unless, if I lived in a box, then maybe it would be enough. But so it's definitely not enough to stop working. I think floatifications, like I said, when that thing came out and, got 100,000 users in the first week, and I don't know how many paid, but let's say it was quite a few thousand. So, you've got double that in amount of pounds. So I don't know, £5,000 or £10,000, something like that. But that was in a space of a week, and that's not going to cover you for a year. And after that, you're probably looking at a couple £100 a month, depending on how hard you promote stuff. So yeah, none of the stuff that I've ever done has been enough to fund my life for any significant period of time.
Yeah, but people have to keep in mind that, as we already said, there are many birds you kill with one stone. If this is how you say it, you make a little bit of money on the side, which is not enough to live from it, but it's nice to have. The app is useful for yourself, so this is already a good. This alone already is enough to build it, basically.
Yeah.
But you also keep learning new concepts and you stay up to date. You have something for your portfolio, so there are these many different goals that you achieve at the same time.
Yeah.
So people should not focus too much on just how much money they can make from it.
No, 100%. It all depends on what the goal is. Because if your goal is primarily, I want to make money so I don't have to work, then I've wasted my time because I've built all these apps and I make £200 a month, right? But my goal was always, I want to build something that I use. And the fact that people will pay me for it is just, that's free money. I didn't build it for you. I built it for me and you're giving me money to use it. So on the one hand, it's free money. But then also, like, we don't have to touch on the contracting stuff, but when I finished university, I had a computer science degree and zero app development experience. When I got my first contract, the reason I got that was because I had built all these apps so I could show them I have zero, like, quote unquote, professional app development experience or qualifications, but I built all of this stuff. And that was enough for someone to say, like, all right, cool, we'll hire you to do this thing. So if your goal is primarily money, then that's a whole different situation. But if your goal is to build portfolio or get a job, or if you just built something that's cool for yourself and you want to release it and someone wants to give you, even $5 a month, that's free money. You didn't build it for them, you built it for yourself. So that's just on top of the effort that you've done.
Yeah, that's true. And we already talked about how to come up with ideas. It's the easiest by building something for yourself, as we already said a few times. A question that I also got a lot is, what is the easiest kind of app if success or monetary success is your goal, I guess, at the Play Store? What's the kind of app that tends to have the most downloads? Is it completely mixed, or are there certain apps that you could build that make it more likely that you make a lot of money from it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I can only give you the answer based on what I've seen, which is that games is the answer. If you want to make money and that is your primary focus and you want to get downloads, then games is the best way to do that, because how many people spend, I guess how many downloads does a game like Angry Birds back in the day get? And then if every one of those users is spending, $2 on coins, I know you don't get coins in Angry Birds, but just for example, then that's how you're making money. And games are addictive and games are things that people go back to. Like, there's not really any other apps I can think of where you would pay more than once a month to use it. So, if you have a subscription of some app that does something really cool, and there's two sides to this, right? So it's either you go for a lot of users and a small amount of money, or you go for 100 users, but they're all paying you $100 a month for whatever this thing is. So that's the way that you have to look at it. But if you was going to go wide, and what's easy is games, because you could build a really silly game, put it out there, maybe it does nothing, build another one, maybe it does nothing. If you build 20 of those like really small, easy games, maybe one of them takes off, and now you've got a decent income, and now you have a platform inside this app where you can then push notification to all of those users and say, if you like this game, I've just released this other game, and then get them using that game. And then you build this little app network where they all advertise each other's apps, and they're all yours. So
Yeah, when it comes to apps, I think nowadays the ones that really make the big money are the ones where the developers or the creators didn't think what kind of app they could build, but they thought, what kind of business do I want to build? And the app is just a tool to use this business.
absolutely, yeah.
Like Uber is not successful because they have such a nice app, but because of the service
100%,
they
yeah.
provide and
Yeah.
how this all works. And I think this is how it works basically today. You start with a real business and a business idea, and then the app is just a tool to let people
To do the
use
business,
this.
yeah, 100%. That's the same with everything. Like Uber, all the food delivery companies. The only thing with that is if you're an independent developer, it gets harder, because you then, if you were trying to make the next food delivery company, which you could totally do, right? There's never going to be nobody's going to be like, oh, I don't want to use this one, I want to use this one. They don't care. They just want food delivered, and if they can use your app, then they'll use that. They don't care. But if you wanted to do it, then now you have to go out to all these businesses and say, do you want to partner with me so that I can put an order in? Or you have to find people that want to be the drivers for your food delivery company. So that's when it gets, like, for me, everything's independent in terms of I'm the only person that's doing it. So I don't have delivery drivers, and I don't have partnered businesses. It's just me. So that definitely limits the amount of things that you could do. But if you was going to do it as a business, then yeah, like the world is your oyster, and realistically it is exactly what you said. The business is not the app. The business is whatever you sell, and your app is just a way to deliver that.
Yeah, one thing I'm wondering is, so when you look back into the first days of the app stores, then this was like the golden times where it was still easy to make money with
Yeah.
simple apps, right? Or easier than today, and to make more money with that. And I wonder if today the same is happening with stuff like crypto and NFTs. I haven't looked too much into these topics. I don't know much about them, but the amount of hype they get, I'm just wondering if I'm missing out by not focusing on them right now, because it seems like there is a new golden time
Yeah.
of something coming up. And being early enough means that you start with that before the whole popularity has noticed how this works and have figured this out. Have you ever looked into this topic, crypto, NFT, stuff like that?
Yeah, so NFTs I did. I think NFTs for me is too volatile, in the sense that, like, a couple months ago people were selling crazy NFTs for silly amounts of money, and most of that silly amounts of money was rich people hedging their bet that this might be worth something in the future. And I think for the most part that probably won't pan out. But in terms of crypto, like, definitely this is the golden, like, right now crypto is like the gold rush, right? It's now you can get in, and the only way is up. And obviously it depends what you pick. Like, if you pick some coding inflow coin, then it might go up, it might not go up, you don't know. But if you're betting on stuff like Ethereum or Bitcoin or any of the big players, like, the only direction they're going is up. And at least in my opinion, I don't see them going anywhere. I don't see them going down, especially Ethereum, because, like, Bitcoin's not going anywhere because it's the only term that most people that are not into crypto space know. And Ethereum's not going anywhere because most of the NFT contracts are built on the Ethereum blockchain. So, those are the two places that I would be betting if I was a betting man.
Okay, so you mainly talked about investing into the stuff,
Yeah.
right? I was more talking about the technology side of that, because
okay.
NFTs right now, what most people think about when they think of NFTs are these images that you can buy, and then suddenly for whatever reason they become super expensive.
Yeah.
I'm not really too interested in this kind of stuff, because a lot of this feels like gambling for me.
Yeah, it is 100%. Yeah.
If there's no real system to it,
Yeah.
then
It's just
basically
luck
gambling.
and chance. Yeah.
But the technology seems
Yeah.
interesting with the smart contracts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if it would make sense to start building apps around this stuff and maybe have
I
a
gotcha.
business that
So
builds on this.
so if we were talking about that, I would say like the smart contracts NFT stuff is super interesting because of how it works. And I would be saying if you were going to build something app related to that, you would build a service or an SDK that lets other people drop this into their apps. And let's say you handle payments. So let's say you could have apps where it creates some sort of smart contract that says when the user gets this value from your app, they then automatically pay $5 to you, right? So then it changes that whole subscription based on a monthly fee or a yearly fee to, like for Reddit to me, it could be every time somebody's listened to 100 of their messages and had those read out, they pay $5. So you only pay for what you use. And then I would not put that in my app because I feel like that would be a lot of effort, but I would build the infrastructure so everybody could put it in their app. And I feel like that if you were looking at business time, that would be where the money is because they have that for podcasting, right? There's this thing called podcasting 2.0 is like a new podcast index where they're basically essentially adding tags to RSS that podcast players that support podcasting 2.0 can use. And one of the things that they have is this thing called value for value, which is basically you can set up as a creator. So for your podcast and my podcast, we can set up essentially like a lightning wallet. And then users who have a specific podcasting app that supports this can set up their thing on their end. And what that basically means is they pay you a fraction of a Bitcoin for every minute they listen to your podcast. So they're consistently streaming you small amounts of Bitcoin, like really small amounts. So they're not worth any money right now. But if you had a huge podcast and the bigger podcast apps picked up this feature, because any podcast app could drop it in, then suddenly, you could be making loads of money from your podcast based on people just streaming you money because they listen to it. And I feel like if you could find a way to apply that to apps in terms of like time used or, value delivered, however you'd want to measure it, then that would be a business idea. But I would definitely I would be like, build the network, like build the infrastructure so somebody could just drop it in as opposed to just build it for your app, because unless your app is a huge app, then you're not going to make that much money from it. But if somebody else wants it and they can go and download your SDK and, maybe it's one of those models where a user streams their money based on how much they use the app, but 1% of that money gets streamed to you because they're using your SDK, then suddenly the way that you make money is based on everyone else's success.
Yeah, nice. I think there's a whole world of new opportunities coming from that, and people should really look into that. And I definitely need to look more into that. And it's even called Web 3.0, right? Because it's the evolution of what we have right now, which is this Facebook and Twitter kind of stuff where one company owns all the data and they make the money from it, and we only get likes and hearts in return for it. Yeah, I don't want to go too detailed about this because it's a whole different world, but it's something people should watch out for.
Definitely.
Because this is this looks like the next golden era coming up, basically. And I don't want to miss that one. Okay, and as you already saw in this Twitter feed where I asked for questions about you, that there are people who are worried that if they have a great idea, it can get stolen by someone. And you were really passionate about this topic. You told me because you think that ideas are actually not that valuable. The execution is more important, right? So do you want to say a bit more about this?
Yeah, sure. I really just wanted to answer it because I know that people think this a lot, and I've been to, when I used to go to meetups, at least prior to COVID, you talk to, I'm a developer, I would go to a meetup and I'd meet a founder of a company who's got an idea, and they don't want to tell me, they want to ask me how much will it cost to build my app, but I can't tell you what my app is because you might steal my idea. And I always thought this was crazy, right? Because ideas are not, like everybody has ideas, right? I just throw out one right now. Like I don't know the logistics of it, but somebody at some point is going to build an SDK so that you can do something with crypto in your app, right? I'm not worried that somebody's going to steal that idea because one, I'm not going to make it. But two, if I was going to make it, like it's not about the idea. It's about what can you do with it. It's about the execution. I've come up with an idea for an app. I could tell everybody, I could tell 100 people, none of them are going to make it. Even if one of them tries to make it, Like, that doesn't mean that they're going to succeed because they don't have the rest of the skills to be able to put it out there and to get users using it and to maintain the app and all these kind of things. So I think in terms of ideas, like, I don't know, I just find it crazy. I know people that will never do anything with an idea, but will hold on to that idea and not tell anybody because they're afraid it will be stolen. And you have, Uber comes out and there's all these people saying, oh, I was probably one of them. I had this idea 6 years ago and I probably did, but I wasn't going to do anything with it. And if I did, I probably was not going to get to the success that Uber did. So it really has nothing to do with the idea, because otherwise it would be like there'd be no Lyft because Uber exists and Lyft is exactly the same thing. So how could that succeed? Because they've just stolen Uber's idea, So that's kind of where I stand on that. But I just wanted to answer it because I know there's a lot of people out here that have got ideas for apps and they might want help or they might want coaching and they don't want to tell anybody their idea because they're afraid they're going to steal it, and nobody is going to steal your idea.
Yeah, so you don't think if I had no idea about programming and I would want to hire someone to build the app idea I have, should I have an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement with them, or should I just not bother with this?
I mean, I guess it depends, right? There's no harm in having it. So sure, make them sign the NDA. They're going to sign it anyways. And then, you can tell them your idea after that and feel comfortable that legally, if they steal your idea, you could sue them, assuming that you have the money to sue them because they stole your idea and it took off and now you can't actually afford to fight them in court. So, but realistically, yeah, have an NDA. You can print one off online, send it to them, they sign it, legally it's done. But in terms of practicality, like, no developer is going to steal your idea I can imagine if you have an idea, right? Somebody came to me, I wouldn't steal an idea, but let's say somebody came to me with the simplest idea in the world and I knew I could do the whole thing myself and market it and everything, and I was going to steal it, then, you lost out. But the odds of that happening are like astronomical. And also, do I want to spend that time and effort in this idea that I'm not invested in? You're invested, it's your idea. I'm just a developer. I would rather just get paid to build the thing. And if you succeed, that's great. And if you don't succeed, I got paid. So
yeah, when I did a little bit of freelance work, I had to sign some NDAs, and I always found it a bit annoying to do that because you have to read them very carefully to not shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
Because there can be some traps in there, I think, that you basically can never again work on a similar app or stuff like that. I don't know if that would hold up in Kurt, probably not.
They usually have clauses where you can't work for a competitor at the same time and you can't work for a competitor. And normally it's like, within 6 months or something like that. Which, I suppose, I think it's the same thing. People are afraid that you're going to go and work for a company that does the exact same thing and tell them everything that your business does. But, I had a thing the other day. So a company that I'm working with sent me wireframes, right? Which were literally A4 piece of paper in a pencil. They had drawn some pictures of what they want these new features to look like. And before they would send it to me, they made me send them an email saying that I promise not to share it with anybody else. And in my head, I'm like, mate, I'm not going to take your pencil drawings and make $1 million idea out of this. Like, this is just, they're just boxes with little images on them. But they're so afraid that somebody's going to steal their, quote unquote idea.
Yeah, so it's all about the execution and not so much about
100%.
The idea. I don't think I have any genius idea where I would think that no one else had this. And yeah, as you already said, something like Uber, this is also a relatively simple idea, right? You don't have to be a genius to come up with it.
They were not the first people that had that idea, but they were the ones that executed it the best.
Yeah, and all the other stuff too, like Amazon. It's not genius to come up with an online warehouse, but they just execute it differently.
100%.
Yeah, and sometimes people come first with an idea and they build it, but there's still the second one or the third one succeeds for whatever reason. They did it better, apparently, in some way.
I think there's a lot of companies like that, right? Where them now, it's like Amazon, but initially Amazon, I think it just sold books. That's all they sold was books on the internet. And now they're this whole other thing because they pivoted and they decided we're going to do this, and that's how it worked out. And now they have Amazon Prime and video and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think in terms of that, if somebody's listening, they primarily want to build an app to make money. The first thing you want to do is just get started and build something. And, if it doesn't work out, you pivot or you build something else and you figure it out. But, you're not going to come up with, it's very unlikely. I don't want to say you're not because it's not impossible, but it's very unlikely that your idea is $1 million idea and your execution is perfect and it plays out exactly like you think it will in your head. So
Yeah, actually heard on a podcast recently that almost all successful companies pivoted at some time.
yeah,
Like Facebook was not meant to be a general social platform, right? It was meant for these Harvard students or whatever
yeah,
university that was. Only Google is an example of a company that stick to their original plan
yeah.
that they had, where
Search,
they
yeah.
exactly knew what they want to do, and this is what they actually did then.
Yeah. But then at the same time, if Google didn't have all of their other services, they would probably make zero money because
Yeah.
they make so much money through ads through everything else that they do. If it was just search and they hadn't added stuff onto it, then it probably wouldn't be very lucrative.
And you already mentioned that you are not so much into marketing, but how important do you think marketing is if you want your app to be successful? And also I wanted to ask, you got featured in rather big publications a few times, right?
Yeah.
The Guardian, BBC News. How did you manage to do that, and what was the impact of that? Did it bring you a lot of users, or didn't it matter too much?
That's a really good question. So I think, so I'm not great at marketing. My marketing strategy, if I release a new app or like a really significant update, is I email all the websites that I think users go to that would be interested in the app. So Android Police, most of my apps are Android focused features, right? So Android Police or Fandroid or Lifehacker. I send them an email, tips@lifehacker.com. And if I don't get a response, sometimes I'll find a specific journalist that writes there and find their email and just send it to them because, they specifically write about Android stuff. So maybe they're interested. That's my whole marketing strategy. And in terms of impact, it makes a huge impact when you go from 0 downloads to being featured on Android Police or somewhere else. That makes a huge impact, and you get a few thousand downloads straight away from people that are interested. And I'm pretty sure I don't know, but I imagine the way that the search on the Play Store works is if you suddenly get that sort of influx of users, then you rank higher when people are searching for stuff that is to do with your app. And so that kind of builds upon itself. And if you can get a bunch of those featured at the same time and they all bring a few thousand downloads, then suddenly, you rise up in the rankings and it's more easy to find your app. But I'm trying to think. So yeah, Lifehacker I got on because I asked. The Guardian, I tweeted the guy. I found a guy who worked for the Guardian who had written quite a few articles about apps. I tweeted at him and I was like, hey, next time you write about apps, maybe you'd be interested in this one. And he tweeted me back and he was like, I already wrote about this 2 weeks ago. I had no idea. So that one was just, he found it. And I assume, and this is not even I assume, I know for a fact that people find other publications, find stuff to write about from other websites. So, the people that write for Lifehacker about Android apps, they read Android Police. So if something pops up on Android Police that they think is interesting, they're going to write about it too because they want the traffic to go to them. So they all kind of feed each other. So he definitely found the app because of one of these, other websites. And BBC News was somebody emailed me. I don't know. I honestly don't know how they found the app. I think they said they saw it maybe on Lifehacker, but it would have been quite a while ago. And they emailed me and they were doing some sort of article about safety in cars and hands-free stuff. Yeah. And they just emailed me and they were like, would you like to be interviewed for this article? And I was like, yeah, cool. So they did, and I was on it, but I don't think that brought a huge influx of users, usually, mostly because the article wasn't about my app. It talked to me and it mentioned my app, but it was about something else. But generally speaking, the things that bring the most users are getting featured in places where your users would be.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of social media marketing. So if I would start a completely new business, a real startup, I would definitely create social media content around it. I would try to cover topics that are related to the problem this business is solving.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's, I don't know, if it's a productivity app, then I would probably start creating some productivity related videos on YouTube or stuff like that. Or if it's an app that should help make the environment cleaner, then I would create content about this and write about these problems and then point people to the solution, basically.
Yeah, I think all it comes down to is I'm lazy and you're not. So like for me, like you're absolutely right. If somebody's listening, go and like build YouTube content, build any kind of content you can around what your app is, because it helps people find it, and you know that the people that you're attracting are your audience. But for me, it's like, I'm not a social media guy at all. You know, if you look at my Twitter feed, I reply very sporadically and occasionally I post something. If you went to my Facebook page, I've posted nothing since like 2014. And Instagram, you know, I'm probably more active on there, but again, that's more active not posting stuff, so people wouldn't see my like they wouldn't see me doing anything on there, because that's just not where I spend my time. But if you know, yeah, like Florian said, like that's the best way to do it if you're willing to do that. But for me, because it's not my business and because it's just a bit of fun for me, I don't.
Yeah, makes sense. And do you do anything special in your apps to retain users, or do you just try to keep the app as useful as possible, and that's basically it?
That's basically it. The only thing that loses users, I think, if they're interested in your app, is if it breaks. So, you know, if there's an issue with the app, I try and fix that. I try and pay attention to Crashlytics, and if there's crashes coming up, you know, make sure you fix those. But aside from that, it's just making sure that it works. And if people are constantly requesting, you know, can you add this feature, then maybe this is the feature that they want. And also you have to weigh up again. Like for me, if I lose users, I'm fine with that because the app does what I wanted it to do and I built it to use for myself. But if it's your business and somebody's constantly asking you, can you add this? You probably want to add that, because otherwise somebody else is going to build the app with that feature, and now that everybody's just going to switch to there because it has this one extra thing that you could have added anyways. But in terms of what I do, I just try and keep it ticking over and pay attention to Crashlytics. I don't really do anything else. And like I mentioned, if I want to try and convert paid users, free users to paid users, then I try and do some push notification messaging around that and target people that haven't. I usually use targeting, which is like they haven't subscribed to the app, obviously, but they've also used the app X amount of time. So you're not just a new user and straight away you get pinged with a message saying, hey, buy the app. So I do some bits and pieces around that. But in terms of retention, I just make sure that it works.
Well, that's in-app messaging you were just talking about.
Yeah, so I have so in the app I have things that are set up mostly for reviews and occasionally for pop-ups to ask, you know, would you like to subscribe? Which would be so for reviews, it would be, you know, if a user's had this app installed for 2 weeks and they've listened to at least 100 messages, then I can be fairly confident that they're interested in using this app and they're having a good experience. And so I'll show them a pop-up and says, would you like to leave a review, right? Because the reviews is essentially how people are going to find your app and decide if they want to use it, because you want a good amount of reviews and you want good reviews. And you can do the same thing with pop-ups to subscribe. But then what I will do is I'll send push notifications, and when it gets to the phone will be like, right, if this user's got this push notification and they've had the app installed for 2 weeks and they've had at least 100 downloads, then show them this push notification saying, would you like to purchase the app for 50% off? But if they've just installed the app, then don't show it to them because now it's just spam. That's kind of how I do it.
Okay, I don't know if I've missed that part, but what SDK or tool are you using to see what the people are actually doing in your app, the users?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to do it. So push notifications is just Firebase cloud messaging, send them a push. You can have topics on push notifications. So what I'll have is when you install the app, it will subscribe you to the installed not paid topic, and then when you buy the app, it will unsubscribe you from that, and it will subscribe you to the paid topic, which means that I can then target, do I want to send this message to everybody, or do I just want to send it to my paid users, or I just want to send it to my unpaid users? And then on the client side, before it shows the message, I'll have some logic that says, should we actually show this message based on how long they've had the app installed? But all of that logic is client side. So, you know, when you install the app, it will just create a shared preference timestamp of the time you installed it. And then every time it reads a message, it will add a counter to your shared preference to say message is read. And then I just do a little bit of logic on the front end so that you make sure that you're not spamming people.
Okay, yeah, seems like a nice approach. And when it comes to the Play Store, have you, I don't know how much you looked into this, have you figured out any Play Store metrics that are particularly important when it comes to getting more downloads and having a higher ranking in the store itself? So for example, is the number of downloads important? Is it important that you have many keywords in your description? Are the ratings important to get higher in the list? Have you any insights on that?
Yeah. So two things. So what you mentioned about keywords is definitely important. I don't know the specifics because I haven't updated my keywords for a very long time, but I know that it helps with the search because it works just like Google search, right? If somebody's searching for something, if someone's searching for something and those words are not in your description or your title, then your app might not come up. So one thing that I find really useful is, let's say, my app is called Read It to Me. If you go to the Play Store, it doesn't say Read It to Me. It says Read It to Me hyphen, and then essentially a bunch of keywords in a sentence, hands-free, reading aloud tool or something. Because in that way, if someone just searches for hands-free, it might show up in the results. But it means that they'll be able to find it, but no one's going to specifically search for the words Read It to Me unless they're exactly looking for my app. So that was one tip. But the other thing is everything else is about the ratings. Like the ratings is everything. If you have 0 ratings or good ratings, that's good. If you have less than 4 stars, then the likelihood that somebody's going to install your app like dramatically decreases. And I think that's just because, like what you said, in the golden days, it was the only app that did this thing, and now there's so many of them. So why would I pick one that's got 3.5 stars when there's this other one that's got 4.5 stars? So managing the ratings is probably the best thing that you can do to help retain your current users and to get new users.
So the rating is mainly important for the psychology of the users
100%,
themselves, but
yeah.
do you think it's also important for how high the app ranks at the store in the first place?
I would imagine so, yeah. And like I don't know for a fact, but to me it seems very logical that if you have 2 apps that do the same thing, and one has 0 stars and 0 ratings, and one has 100, 4-star ratings, like which one does Google want you to see at the top of your search results, or Apple want you to see? Because they also want you to have the best experience, right? They don't want you to install an app that has no ratings because they don't know if it's good. So I feel like I don't know for sure, but I would imagine the better your ratings are, the higher you would rank.
Yeah, I think these days it's not like in the past where you could trick Google's search engines to rank your app higher, or also your Google results if you have a website. I think these days the best you can do is just straightforward.
Yeah.
Try to build the best solution you can, get good ratings, and yeah, build a good app basically.
Yeah.
I think that's the main search engine optimization you can do. It's not like in the 90s where you can just stuff a lot of keywords into your website or your app description.
It just, yeah.
Or I guess back then we didn't have these mobile apps yet, but there you could just put a ton of keywords into your website and you could trick the Google search engine this way. But it's not like this anymore today. Just do the best service you can, basically. This is why I also don't focus on SEO when it comes to my YouTube videos, for example. Okay, I try to write a good title and description, but I don't do any tricks. I don't do any hacks, and I don't lie in the description or anything like that.
Yeah.
Because you can't really trick Google anymore.
No. And it affects your rating when it goes wrong, right? Like if somebody keeps clicking on your video because they think it's one thing and then they only watch 5 seconds, then they're just going to downrank your video and say it's not good for this topic, and now you don't rank anywhere. So
yeah, and they leave the video early and then you have a low watch time, which is the worst you can have, I think. But okay, one thing is important. That's the thumbnail when we talk about YouTube videos. Because this is the equivalent, I guess, of the rating of the app in the store. People just have to, it has to look attractive to people. Otherwise they won't click it because they are still humans. And you already touched on this a little bit, but how much time do you have to invest in maintenance in your app to keep them updated? Because sometimes Google requires updates, right?
Yeah.
And especially since you have some paid products in there and premium features, do you have to pay special attention to these paid apps to keep them updated? Do you have to keep them updated forever, basically, now that people have paid money for it? And also, what's the Min SDK you're supporting in your apps?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good question. So I think, to answer the first part, how often I update them would be usually once a year. And the reason being, like the apps that I have now that are still there, they're not new apps. They're probably like 4, 5, 6 older than that. And they have all the features in them that I want them to have. And at least from my user feedback, nobody really asked for anything else. So there's no adding new features or things like that. and they're generally pretty stable, so there's not that much crash fixing. So really, it's like once a year, I will update it to the new, target SDK version. Or if Google, sometimes they send you things saying, your app now has to have a privacy policy built in, or it needs to have, a certain SDK needs to be this minimum version because we're turning off this old SDK, stuff like that. Aside from that, there's not really any maintenance to it. And then what was the second part of that question? If I've forgotten now.
Yeah, what's the min SDK was the
Yeah,
question.
right. So the minimum SDK is 21, mostly because that is the least amount of backwards compatible support that you need to write. There's not really that much that's changed between 21 and 30 where you have to do, if it's this version, then do this and stuff like that. And also it like from all the clients that I work with have the same thing. And I think it's because, or at least I know it's because if you look at the amount of Android devices that are out there that are active, 21 covers like 90+% of all of them. So it's you leaving out a really small portion of users, and the likelihood is if you're running a device older than that, depending on what your app is, it might not support your app very well anyways because of the hardware. So I minimum of 21.
Yeah, 21 makes your life a lot easier.
Yeah.
The next lower one was 19,
Yeah.
and there you have to do a lot more stuff to keep it backwards compatible.
Yeah.
I heard a lot of people that prefer 21 because it just makes your life easier.
I think that covers the majority of users, and also like you can lower your minimum SDK version and your previous users won't get the update, but they can still use the old version of the app. So they're not really going to complain unless, the previous version was massively broken and you only fixed it in the version that supports 21. So.
And for an app like Read It To Me, that it's not like an app where you enter some stuff into a database, but it's really a utility app that changes the way your phone works in some way. And what I can imagine is that you can have a lot of problems with updates of the Android system itself.
Yeah.
Where you get a new Android version and suddenly stuff stops working in the app. Did you have a lot of problems with that in the past?
Historically, yes, because I never set a max SDK version, which I do now. So you could install it on any version after this. So I wouldn't know that it's broken in the new Android version until somebody tells me. Whereas now I have to actually add support for the new Android version. So I'll never get kind of blindsided or it doesn't work and it's on the Play Store. But yeah, historically, yes, I think the biggest change they made was when they made it so that you could only run background services indefinitely if it was a foreground service, which basically just means it needs to be attached to a notification. And they didn't make it really straightforward to do that. So, my app is constantly listening in the background because it's constantly listening for, have you plugged your headphones in? Should I turn on now? Have you connected a specific Bluetooth device that says I should start reading now? And a lot of these things you can't get callbacks, and you also, so you used to be able to set up manifest callbacks for certain things. And then they changed that to now you can only set up intent filters in code. So something has to be running to be able to listen for your headphone being plugged in, as opposed to you could just passively have it in your manifest and you'd be notified. So definitely things like that caused issues. But for the most part now that's resolved. And generally speaking, if you have a max SDK version, then you don't run into these issues because you'll know about it, because you'll bump that number up and you'll install it on your phone before you release it and realize it doesn't work. So
yeah, this max SDK version is a really interesting approach. I didn't know that. I think that you can actually set a max SDK. I know that you have a min and a target SDK, but I didn't know about the max SDK.
Yeah, you can. Let me just double check because I'm pretty sure that is what I did, unless I'm just talking nonsense. But because I haven't done this for a while, but I'm 99% sure that is the approach that I take. Because saying that, none of my clients actually do that. I just realized when I was thinking about it. Right, let's go have a look. Yeah, max SDK version. Yeah.
Okay, nice. It's definitely a nice trick and makes sense. And did you, when something broke in the past, did you get a lot of bad ratings, or how does this work out?
No. So once, I think it was only once, I did what you're never supposed to do, which is, somebody said something doesn't work and I fixed it and I didn't test the fix and I built it and I put it out and now the app crashes for everybody. So that was not pretty and you get a lot of bad ratings for that. But generally speaking, no, the best way to deal with this stuff is, so there's two things, right? One, you want to fix the issue when it's presented. So somebody says to you, Rob, this doesn't work. You fix it, you put it out, you tell them there's problem solved. before you get to that point, at least in my apps, I have like 5 different places that says, do you have an issue? Email me, contact me, request a raise a bug, request a feature, and they all do the exact same thing. But I have buttons all over the place because what I've realized is if you don't give users a really obvious way to give you feedback, the only way they know to give you feedback is in a review. So they'll leave you a 1-star review and it will ask you a question. Whereas they could have just asked you a question if you gave them the opportunity to, and then they'd leave you a 5-star review because they'd be like, oh, Rob is really responsive. He replied straight away. He fixed my issue. So you have to definitely manage that communication aspect and figure out the best way for your specific app to give people avenues to be able to contact you. But that's basically the gist of it, yeah.
And where did you place these different links?
Yeah, so it depends, right? So on Read It To Me, if you open the app, you just have a list view with different options. One of them says like set up your profiles. The next one's to do with like how quickly do you want it to read and the pitch and stuff like that. You've got another button that says, what apps do you want to read? And then at the bottom, it has a button that says more. And if you click on that, it has all the options to purchase the app. But that's where it has like contact me, request a feature, raise a bug, all these different things. They all go to the same thing. They open up your email app with me pre-populated as the recipient with a title and some body pre-populated that tells me, this is the version of the app they have. This is what apps they have enabled. This is what settings they have enabled. So I could reproduce it on my end to see what the issue is. But I just put them in there. I think it really depends. Like other apps should be super straightforward, right? If you had a social media app, you'll have a button somewhere where it has a bunch of options in it. So, you'd have like your home feed, then you'd have a button for notifications, and then you'd probably have another button that just shows you like 15 other options. And a bunch of those options should be different things that people might want to contact you about, written out separately as opposed to just one contact me button. So they might be like, I don't want to contact you, I want to request a feature. And there's a button that says request a feature. And they don't know that it does the same thing. They just know it's exactly what I want. And then that way you don't end up with reviews that have crazy things in them, like this doesn't work, or a 1-star review that says this app is awesome, can you please add this? So
yeah, that's a good point. So people should definitely add this feature or these bug report buttons into the app. Otherwise, you're forcing the users to give you a bad rating, basically.
Yeah, you give them no other option. Even things like social media, if you're super active on social media, just say, contact me, and then maybe it doesn't take them to email. Maybe it says like, here's my Twitter, here's my email, here's my Instagram, and they can pick which one they want because maybe they just want to tweet you about something. Like you want to give them as many options as possible to contact you so that they don't have to go on the App Store and leave a review just to get in touch.
And do you have to do anything special to support a wide range of devices, not when it comes to the SDK level, but to the different manufacturers, especially the Chinese ones often cause problems? To just accept that your app maybe does not work on some devices or doesn't work properly, or do you do anything special to support all devices?
Yeah, so historically it used to be Samsung devices that were terrible because they used to break parts of the Android system for no reason. And then you'd have to write pieces of code that only work on Samsung devices. But generally speaking, I haven't really run into that in probably the last few years. But I think you also, like you said, you have to accept that this doesn't work everywhere. And if you get crashes or you get users reporting, it doesn't work on a specific device and you can fix it, great. But sometimes you can't fix it, or sometimes the effort to fix it is just not worth your time. And then you just, blacklist that device from your Play Store account, so the app won't be offered on those devices. But generally speaking, there's not really anything that I've had to do recently to combat different devices.
But Read It To Me needs a foreground service, right?
Yeah.
And I know that some of these Chinese devices, they love to kill services. Did you have any problems with that?
So there is this thing around that as well, but that was... So I solved that, but I didn't solve it specifically for Chinese devices because there's also like, my Samsung phone loves to kill apps. I had a OnePlus 7, I think. It used to love to kill everything as soon as I pressed the home button. So you have to work around stuff like that, but most of that is you have to code things in a way. It's the same as anything, right? Like you don't code an activity so that when you open it, it works, but when you resume it, it crashes. You code it so that if it gets killed and somebody tries to resume it, all the data that you passed to it initially is still available because you passed it in a bundle or what have you. So this was the same thing, I basically bank on the service being killed, and then I write the code to say, right, we're resuming from scratch because we've just started. So you have a service on create, you very obviously just created this service. Make sure you reset anything that you had saved in shared preferences to, the original settings, because the service is not running anymore, and you start again. And if that happens like every 5 minutes, it's a terrible experience for the user, and it probably drains a ton of battery life to keep, turning this stuff on and then killing it and turning it on again. But you have to work around stuff like that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I also just recently recorded an episode with Gabo Varadi, which will release before this one, where we talked a lot about process dev. Do you pay a lot of attention to process dev, or do you just ignore it? Because I know some people just pretend that it doesn't exist, or they don't know that process dev is a problem.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. So for the Read It To Me app, I have to, because but my attention is mostly, I have to assume it's going to be restarted because that's what I've asked it to do, and that's basically as much as I can do. But I have to, because it's a background service, right? There is no foreground app. The user doesn't know the app's been killed. They just know my app stopped reading, and they don't know why. So I have to make sure that as much as I can mitigate, it gets killed, it gets restarted, and make sure it works. But in terms of any front-end facing apps, like, not particularly, no. I think that's the cost of doing business, as they say. It's like if you've got a live app running and it goes to the background, and it gets killed, and then you open it and it starts back on the homepage. Like, there is definitely things you can do for that, and I think it depends. If you have an app that has like a basket of items and the app gets killed and you lose all your items, you have to work around, if the app gets killed, let's not lose all my items, because that's a horrible user experience. If I have the Facebook app and I'm on the homepage, and then I close it and it gets killed, and I reopen it and I'm still on the homepage, it makes no difference. So
yeah, but that's when you're lucky, because what usually happens is that the app automatically brings you back to the screen you were on before you put the app into the background.
Yeah.
And this can really break the app.
100%, yeah.
If you move to a detail screen, for example, and you send an ID over, but you didn't save it across process dev, and your app is killed, and then you come back to the detail screen, but there is no item to display anymore, stuff like that.
So this is also part of the way that you have to kind of build things, in that for example, if you have a fragment, don't pass parameters into your fragment creator, because as soon as that's killed, those parameters are not restored. So you want to put them in your arguments. But you also want to anticipate that they might be blank and then do some sort of action, because that could also happen. So I think it definitely depends, but generally speaking, I think you just have to, like, one, you have to do things the best way that you can, and then two, you also have to assume that something could go wrong. So for example, if I'm passing an object to an activity and I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to do, when I get to that activity, let's make sure, is this object null? If it's null, let's not worry about trying to do all these actions on it. Let's just exit the app. And, if you have to exit the app and say something went wrong with a toast message, because realistically you should never be in that scenario, then so be it. But you can't, like, you can, but it just wastes a lot of time to try and be like, right, let's retrace what was the back stack supposed to be up to this point. Can we recreate everything? Can we recreate all the objects and all that kind of stuff? And for me, for my apps, it's not relevant. For my clients, it would be like, what is the behavior that you want to happen here, and how much time do you want to pay me for to try and kind of work around these edge cases? So.
Yeah, I think a lot of bigger apps that I'm using also just restart. At least I feel like this is the case.
Yeah.
I know that when I open Instagram after a while, then it always goes back to the feed. But I think they actually do this on purpose, so you are sucked into the feed again.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
And you see new posts.
It's a feature. It's not a bug.
Yeah, I think they do this on purpose. And also TikTok, when you are on the first screen and you press the back button, which you normally would expect closes the app, they actually load a new post. And then they show a toast message saying you have to press it again
Twice,
to leave the app. But this is really, it feels almost malicious to me to do it like that, because they want you to see that new post, and they know that if a new post loads, you won't click that back button again immediately, because you see something new and you are interested in that.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I guess it makes sense that it works to keep more engagement, but this is going into a bit of malicious territory, in my opinion.
No, I 100% agree with you. It's bad UX is great marketing. And I've had clients who are like, they don't have an app that's anything like that. They'll have like a shopping app and you press the back button and they're like, no, we want them to see a message that says press it again. And I would have to explain to them like, no, that's terrible UX. Like, no, if they press the back button, they want to leave. They're not unsure that they want to leave. And if they were unsure, they can come back. So yeah, but to TikTok's point, that's their business, is getting you to stay on the app. So any tricks they could use to do it, they're going to do it.
Yeah, Facebook is similar. I also want to mention that if people want to learn more about the process dev topic, they can watch my episode with Gabo Varadi, because there we talk about this in more detail, and Gabo is really the messenger of process dev. It's his passion topic. He really loves talking about it. But I was also wondering, how important do you think tests are? And do you write tests for your app, or do you say they are so simple and have so few lines of code that you don't bother with that?
Yeah, so I used to say that they're so simple and they have so few lines of code. And then what I realized is you don't do any feature work for 2 years. And then when you go back to it, you don't understand what it does. And when you do understand what it does, you don't understand how you can break stuff because there's no test. So for Read It To Me now, the last refactor I did, it's like not all of it's code covered, but all the important moving parts are code covered, because if in a year's time I have to go back and do something, I want to know that I'm not breaking anything. And then in terms of client work, that's mostly dependent on how much time we have to do the project and how much, it basically works out to the time. Like if there's a really tight deadline and they don't want us to write tests because it will take a longer amount of time, then we don't. But generally I try and code cover as much as you can, primarily because if it's your own project and you go back to it after a certain period of time and you don't remember how it works, then you don't know if you're introducing bugs. So this is an easy way to make sure that you're not. And then if you're working on a project with other developers and, I leave the project and somebody else comes on, they don't know if what they're doing is going to break stuff because there's no tests saying that it works or it doesn't. So I would definitely advocate writing tests. I definitely advocate writing tests for your own stuff. I don't generally write UI tests. I write unit tests to test like logic and functionality. I don't test if you click this button, does it go to the right screen? Because I could do most of that stuff manually. And I just don't bother to do it, if I'm being honest. But in terms of tests, to test like functionality, then yeah, definitely unit tests.
Yeah, the one app I have on the store, I also put a lot of focus on tests, mainly because it's my learning project and I want to do it properly. But I noticed that it really slows new features down,
Yeah.
adding new features. Because I feel like I have to write a ton of tests to really be sure that it doesn't break easily. And I feel like I'm spending now 90% of the time writing tests. I don't know if that's too much, but
I think generally writing tests, it depends what it is, but writing tests normally takes equal, maybe a little bit less, the same amount of time as writing the actual code. But it depends what it is, right? Because like you said, there's so many different permutations. If you want to make sure that you cover every single base, that is a lot of tests. Sometimes it might be good enough to just be like, here's the input, here's the end result. I don't really care what happens in the middle as long as the end result is always correct. And then, all that middle code is not tested, but at least you know that the end result is absolutely fine. So it kind of depends how you approach it. But generally speaking, tests are not quick to write.
yeah, I think a big reason why it feels like 90% time investment for me is because I still have to learn a lot about writing tests. So this is why it slows me down, basically.
No, that makes sense.
And a lot of the features I'm writing, I already know how to do it.
Yeah. I was going to say also writing tests changes how you write code, because the more you learn how to write tests, the more you learn that the code that you wrote previously may not be testable, and you have to write in ways to make it more testable. But once you get like really good at that, then it's usually faster to do it.
Yeah, that's true. I had to change a few things in order to test them properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when it comes to uploading the app to the Play Store, is there anything special people have to keep in mind? When I uploaded my app to the Play Store, I used their checklist that they have.
Yeah.
I know they have had this for a few years already, and I found it really useful. They cover all the steps that are necessary to upload the app. I will probably put a link to that into the show notes. But is there anything special people have to keep in mind before they upload their app to the Play Store?
I don't think so. Like, I think the checklist covers everything. The only thing that I would advocate is if you're doing updates to an existing app, make sure you roll it out slowly. So don't just roll it out to 100% of your users. Roll it out to like 5%. See if there's any issues, 10%, 50%. Or if you have to get it out today, roll it out to 99%. And the reason being that if there is a huge issue and you roll it out to 99%, you can press pause and no new users will get it. So maybe only 15% of your audience is updated. If you roll it out to 100%, you can't stop it from going out. It's out now.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So if you end up in that situation like I did, where you've released an update and it crashes for everyone, if it's rolled out to 99%, I can just press stop. Whereas if it's rolled out to 100, now I have to get a fix out right now. And depending on how long the approval process takes and how long it takes to get onto people's devices and stuff, it's going to be crashing for people for a while. So I definitely recommend like rolling it out.
That's a nice trick, definitely.
Yeah.
One thing I forgot when I released my app for the first time was to actually apply code shrinking.
Yeah.
This was not activated by default, and I completely forgot about this. So my app was big and not obfuscated, and whatever other downsides this has. But this was also then described in this checklist I was mentioning. It's all there. They explain all this stuff. There's documentation for all of this. People have been asking me to make a tutorial about this, but I feel like there's nothing I could add to this. I really think the checklist is on point that they have. It's really good. And it covers everything you have to know.
Yeah, agreed.
And sometimes you hear these Google Play Store horror stories where people get banned because they knew someone who had an account who broke some rule. Did you have any trouble with Google Play in the past, or was it all smooth sailing so far?
Yeah, no, I've had a bunch of apps removed from the Play Store because they said that they violated copyright issues, which they didn't. But at the same time, they were for so I used to have floatifications, and then one of the like monetization streams was I used to release theme packs for notifications. So you could change the color of your icons to be blue or whatever, and you could pay 99 cents or $99. $99 or 99 pence to get the theme pack, and a bunch of those packs got removed because they said it was copyright infringement when it wasn't, and I think I could have appealed that. But I've also had, I'm trying to think, I've definitely had some apps removed where I had to appeal and say that this was not removed for any reason, but I'm trying to think of what apps. I can't remember specifically which ones it was, but I remember there was at least one occasion where I had an app, because they don't tell you, right? They don't say, oh, if you don't fix this thing, your app's going to be removed. Just one day you wake up and you got a message saying your app was removed because it violates so-and-so. And so I remember I had to message them, which is also really hard to do. They don't make it really straightforward to get back into contact with them and say, my app got removed because of this. It says it violates, your terms and conditions, section 17C. Can you tell me which part of this it violates? And then I waited 4 days and they were like, oh, we made a mistake because it didn't. And put it back on. So I've definitely had run-ins with that where they just, because they'll just suspend your app. And yeah, and they also have this thing where if your app gets deleted, like if they have to suspend your account, then they basically know all of the accounts that are linked to your account. So let's say they suspend my developer account, I then go and work for a company, they make me an email that's, rob.joseph@company.com, and they associate that with their Play Store account. Their Play Store account could now get banned because I work for them and I'm attached to their Play Store account. And I don't know how Google does their magic where they know that it's always me. I assume it's like IP address or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, I've definitely had run-ins with that. I also had a run-in where WhatsApp sent me a cease and desist message saying that my Read It To Me app infringes on their like IP and copyright because it reads their messages. And I wrote a whole post about, no, was it WhatsApp or was it something else? No, it was something else. That's what it was. So I had an app that was called, I think it was called Can't Talk. And it was basically an auto reply app. So, you turn it on. Let's say right now we're having this podcast conversation. I set my app Can't Talk to on. And anytime anybody messages me, it will send them a message saying, sorry, I'm on a podcast. I'll get back to you, in 2 hours time. And I got a cease and desist message from WhatsApp about that app because they said that because it replied to their WhatsApp notifications, that it was in violation of their IP and stuff like that. So I ended up pulling that from the Play Store. I rebranded it as something else. I released it and it didn't do anything, and I pulled it eventually because I didn't want to maintain it. But I remember I wrote a whole post, it's on Medium somewhere, somebody could find it, about cease and desist, because it basically, they were claiming that their notification was IP when it wasn't. It's like as soon as a notification appears on Android and I have access through public APIs to be able to interact with it, it's not theirs anymore. So that was one of those things where they were just like picking on smaller companies. I don't think I was the only person that got it. So I've definitely had experiences like that.
But at least you didn't have your Google Play account banned.
Nope.
I know that some people that actually avoid putting out their own apps because they are scared that they become unhireable later because they have an app that was banned.
That's like a real risk though. I think having an app that's banned is fine. Having your account suspended basically means that it, like, you don't have to, like, nobody asks when you go for an interview, have you had a Play Store account like deleted or banned or anything. And I think as long as you're not associated with that company's Play Store account, it's fine. But how are you going to negotiate when you're in the job saying, oh, please don't add me to your Play Store account, because you can't tell them why, because they wouldn't hire you in the first place. So it definitely puts you in like a tricky position. But also, like, the amount, I feel like it's unlikely that your account would get suspended or deleted or banned unless you're doing something you really shouldn't be doing. But at the same time, because they don't make it really easy to get in touch with them, they don't really have formal kind of appeal processes. It's kind of just whatever they feel like at the time or whatever this bot says to do. So it's not like there's someone you can go and talk to and explain why you shouldn't be banned. If you're banned and they decide you're banned, then that's a problem.
Yeah, and that's like Reddit. There are often people who say they didn't do anything wrong and their account gets banned, but I think almost always eventually it turns out that they did do something bad or broke some rule. So you can't always listen to these people, because I think Google is not so fast in actually terminating your account. You really have to do something bad first.
I've also read accounts online from people who claim that they work at Google saying that they have access, so they could literally just go in, pick a name out of a hat and ban the account. And because the appeals process is so poor, the likelihood that anybody would ever ask, why did that happen, is really slim. And if that happens, then it sounds like you're pretty much screwed. So.
Yeah, but what would be their motivation to do that? You mean,
no,
if they personally
100%.
dislike...
It would be like a personal thing, or they just think it's fun to ban people. Like, I don't know. But there is, like, I wouldn't say it's a risk. If you're not doing anything wrong, I think it's fine. I've had a Play Store account since 2011. It's 2021 as we record this. And I've had some apps pulled because they got suspended because in violation of policies that they weren't. And I've had apps suspended that I never appealed. So as far as Google is concerned, like, those apps are violating policies and my account's still there. So either I'm just really lucky or you do really have to do something wrong to get banned.
And do you think there's any point in looking into alternatives to the Play Store like the Amazon Appstore, or is it not worth it?
I think it depends. For me, it's like it's not worth it because Amazon doesn't have, or at least a successful phone. So my apps are specifically for phones, right? Read It To Me, so that you have your phone with you. It's reading messages. It's not really meant to be used on a tablet, although you could install it on that. So for me, no, but I think it depends. It goes back to the question that you had earlier. If your goal is as many downloads and as much money as possible, and it takes you very little effort, then yeah, you should be on all these platforms, because why would you not make an extra $50 on Amazon for just dropping their SDK into the app and, uploading it to their app store? But in terms of anything else, like if you're on an Android device, Play Store is where all the apps are, and that's really where you want to be. I think potentially if there's other markets that I don't specifically know about, so maybe in China they have a different Play Store for apps that don't like run Android but they don't have the Google stuff, then you might want to be on there. But aside from that, like, it just depends. My motivation is not to make money or to get the most users possible, so the Play Store is fine for me. But it just depends. Like, if you're Amazon Prime, you want to be on everything, right? Like, you want to be on the Play Store, the Amazon Store, the Samsung Store. You want to be as many places as people can get you. So
I think I already asked if your apps are native. They are native Android apps, right?
Yep.
And what's your opinion about cross-platform? Have you looked into that? Stuff like Flutter or React Native? What's your opinion about that?
Yeah, I've looked into a little bit. So React Native, I think so. There's two things, right? I think Flutter probably going forward, and I think like 5 years maybe, is probably a very safe bet if you want to get a job. Like, that's going to be part of the future of app development because it's cross-platform and it works so well. I think React Native is not going anywhere, but I'm not a huge fan of like JavaScript on mobiles. Essentially, like that's not my thing. And then in terms of like a KMP and stuff like that, I think so. I know like Mitch Tabian did some videos and he was very into like, this could be better than Flutter. I think it depends, but for me, like KMP is great for cross-functional like logic. So you're working for a client, they have an iOS app, they have a web app, they have a phone app, and you all want to share the same logic. You could do something with like that with KMP, and I've looked into doing stuff like that before, because then it means basically all your logic's in one place, but also all your bugs are in one place. So you fix it in one place and it fixes it everywhere. But I think in terms of app development, probably like I'm probably like 80% sure that Flutter is the future, and in 5 years' time, we're all going to be writing Flutter apps is kind of where I'm at with it, mostly because I don't feel like Google would pump so much time and effort and money into something that they would then just let die in favor of, Android and Kotlin and stuff like that. So that's kind of my gut feeling on it. But then at the same time, Google builds stuff all the time that they just kill for no reason.
Yeah,
So,
I was just about to say they're notorious for that.
Maybe that's absolutely not true. I don't know.
Yeah, but KMP also feels like a relatively safe bet to me.
Yeah.
I think it's like a middle ground between completely native or not. I guess KMP is also native, but a middle ground between writing completely different apps for Android and iOS, but also Flutter on the other side. KMP seems to lie in the middle somewhere.
Yeah.
With KMP, I mean Kotlin multiplatform.
Yeah.
The benefit of this seems to be that you are closer to the metal. Because you write these platform-specific UI code, right? And I think a problem with Flutter is that you often don't have quite as good access to these system services like Bluetooth and stuff like that. I think you need special plugins for that or special adapters.
It's like React Native. Like you have to have, essentially somebody has to have built a library to work with that thing that you want it to work with. But I think the upside for Flutter for me is that the UI element is entirely handled inside Flutter, so they can update that as they go along, and it's much smoother than writing it, which is crazy, but it runs smoother than running a native app. So I think if they figure out that piece, or they get that native piece into a place where it's really easy to do all the things as it is natively, then I don't see any downsides to using it. And same with KMP, but I think because KMP still runs, like it still has to cross-compile into, Android UI code or iOS UI code, whereas Flutter runs in its own engine. So essentially it's like running a game on a game engine. They know exactly what's being displayed because all they tell the system that's being displayed is a blank window, and they get to draw everything in there themselves.
Flutter is definitely also faster to set up and build an app than KMP.
Yeah.
But I also want people to not panic now when you said that Flutter is the future. Native app development will probably still be around in a few years.
Oh yeah, 100%. If you're talking about to get a job, Flutter is the future in like 15 years, because companies are very, very, very slow at doing anything. Like I still work for companies that have Java code. So that is definitely not something to worry about.
And yeah, when it comes to your apps, do you prefer any particular architecture like MVVM or MVI, or does it not play such a big role considering that, for example, Read It To Me doesn't have a real UI?
Yeah, I think so. My favorite architecture right now is MVI. I try and use that in as many places as I can, and the reason being is, well, one, it's really, really simple. Two, it really easily isolates where all the pieces of your code live. So the UI doesn't have any logic; it just gets told display this or do this. All the logic lives in your view model, and then you have your models with all your data. So I feel like it separates it really nicely, and it works really well. And it's really easy to read code if it's done well, where you can easily see, like, okay, the view model setting this intent to say do this thing, the UI gets this intent, it does this thing. So I really like that. And I specifically like it because when you go to a new project, so I'm a freelancer, I jump on a project where there's already 10,000 lines of code. It's the easiest thing, if it's done well, for me to just go in straight away, and I can figure out how it works without spending a bunch of time trying to like click through and trace how all these things play together. But in terms of your own apps, like I think that's a prime place to experiment, and maybe you build one screen that's got MVI and one screen that's got MVP and one screen that's MVVM, and like see what you like better and learn the stuff. So I don't think you have to be tied to it. But my preference right now is definitely MVI.
Okay, then this episode will be a nice counterpart to the previous one with Gabo Varadi because he doesn't like MVI at
Oh,
all.
really? Okay, cool. That'll be interesting to
And
hear.
does modularization play a role in your app, or are they too small for that to matter?
So personally, they're too small for that to matter. If you work for people, then yes. And I think it depends. So the reason that I like modularization is not because what other people would think, it's because it makes the app faster to compile. So rather than spending 5 minutes trying to build this monolith project, it gets built in a minute because the other modules I haven't touched are already pre-compiled from previously, so it doesn't get compiled again. So that's one of the huge benefits to going modular. But otherwise, it's just if you have a huge app, it helps separate things into different pieces. And if you had an app where maybe you share components between different apps, for example, I don't know, they all like you've got two apps that do the same UI layer, but they are based on different backends. Then you might have, the UI layer is one module because then you can drop it into two different apps as opposed to having to copy and paste that code. So there's definitely benefits to it. But generally speaking, on client projects that are big, I like modules because it makes it much faster for me to develop.
Yeah, okay. Unfortunately, I don't have really experience with modularization for that. And in my app, it also doesn't matter, at least
Yeah.
yet. Yeah, besides that, as an app developer, are there any nice, useful tools that come to mind besides Android Studio and the standard stuff that you use that make your life easier? Are you using any design tools, for example, or stuff like that?
Not particularly. I think outside of code, probably nothing. Like I like GitHub. I use GitHub for like pull requests and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But aside from that, no. If I like so for clients, I like to set up GitHub Actions to run like CI, so running the unit tests automatically deploying apps to like the Play Store, or a feature that I really like with Firebase is app distribution. So you can upload apps to Firebase, and then you can send the link to people to download, or you can add their email address, and they automatically get new builds. So when I'm working with clients, I can keep sending them new builds without having to publish to the Play Store. So that's really nice. But aside from that, I can't think of anyways any other tools I use.
I can't think of any either. And why do you prefer freelancing over having a normal full-time job?
You said we're limited on time. This is like an hour and a half answer.
Okay.
No, I'm joking. I'll give you the cliff notes. So why do I prefer it? So one, I like to work for myself, and freelancing is not working for yourself, but is as close to it's as close as you get to working for yourself in terms of I'm in charge of my time. I'm in charge of what I work on next. The only thing that I get told to do is deliver this thing by this date. So that's the first part. The second part is the flexibility. So with a job, so for example, I like to travel prior to COVID anyways. With a job, I can't tell them every 3 months, hey, I'm going to take a month off and go traveling because I get fired. But with freelancing, I could take a 3-month contract, not renew it, go travel for a month, come back and get a new one. Second to that is the amount of experience that you get from working on so many different contracts. So I've been working on Android professionally since 2012, so that's like 9 years. And if I'd worked for the same company for the past 9 years, I would have like one fraction of the experience that I have in terms of architecture, in terms of like using coroutines or new things that come out in Android, or different types of apps or different types of working, all of that kind of stuff, because I'd only ever worked for the same company. So you just work with this one specific way, use these specific tools. If they're adventurous, maybe you get to play with stuff like Jetpack Compose, but generally, probably I'm still working in Java and a little bit of Kotlin because, they don't want to pay me to change stuff that new. So those are all of the reasons that I do it. And then on top of that, at least in the UK, and I think this is the case for most places, freelancers get paid more money than employees. So why would you work for somebody and have all the drawbacks that I just mentioned and get paid less when you could get paid more and get more experience and do less work?
Yeah, so I have a whole episode about freelancing if people want to know more about this. We don't have to talk about how to find clients and all that stuff. I talked with Don about this.
Nice.
So people should check out this episode. Yeah, I also wanted to quickly touch on your podcast. I will put a link to your podcast, to both of them, into the description below.
Cool.
Maybe you can quickly say why you started one.
Yeah, sure. Well, I started one for the same reason that I built my apps, which is I wanted to listen to a podcast that didn't exist, at least that I couldn't find. So I wanted a podcast where it was about app development, but it wasn't about code. Like, I didn't want to listen to people talking about how to code specific things or, you know, the ins and outs of unit testing. I wanted to have conversations that you would have with people that you work with, you know, by the coffee machine, that's about app development or about technology, but not specifically technical, which is the reason that I started the show. And then to your point, it became a really good way of just meeting people that I wanted to meet or talking to people that I wouldn't otherwise ever get a chance to speak to. So, you know, that's the whole gist of why I started the show, and why I carried it on. And for people that are listening or watching, you know, I got you to be on season 2, which is not out yet, and I haven't actually edited it yet, so it's probably a ways off. But at some point that will come out, and that will be a really interesting listen. So the conversations like that would not happen if I did not have the podcast.
Does this podcast also help you with finding clients, or does it not play a role for that?
I think so. It helped me find one client in as much as I can remember in the whole time that I've done it, which as we're listening now will be like 1.5 years. It will be old. I found one client because somebody listened to the podcast, had somebody that they knew that was looking for an Android developer, and straight away recommended me. And they recommended me to them, and I talked to them, and I got the gig, and I built the app and all that kind of stuff. So I found one. So I don't think it helps generally finding clients, but I do know that almost every interview that I've had with a client since, they like the fact that I have a podcast. I think because it comes across as I'm an expert, because I have a podcast, even though they can see I have all this experience, I feel like it's one of those things, the same as if you have apps on the Play Store, it puts you a little bit above other developers. It seems like the podcast also does the same thing.
Yeah, it's all kind of personal marketing.
Yeah.
But the apps have a bigger impact.
The apps, so now the apps have zero impact, but to start out with, I would never have been able to become a freelancer if I didn't have apps on the Play Store, and I was able to demonstrate that I could do that.
So we are almost done. Just one more thing I wanted to ask is, maybe you can quickly touch on that. Where do you learn your stuff? Do you have any specific sources, or do you just Google your problems and that's it?
Yeah, generally I just Google stuff. It depends. So sometimes Android comes up with new stuff, and I like to watch the little videos that they put on, which are not like, they kind of walk you through the code, but they have like fun animations and stuff, and it's like 5 minutes. And that's not because I want to learn it. That's just because I want to have an understanding of how does it work, and then I'll figure out like how to actually implement it. But generally speaking, my favorite way of learning is I have a problem, I Google it, I try and find some tutorials, or I try and find a Stack Overflow post. I try and understand how it works, and then I try and go and do it myself. I'm not a huge fan of following tutorials. I just like to get ideas of how stuff works. And I feel like at this point, because I'm experienced enough that I could take that little bit that I've understood and try and go and figure it out myself.
Okay, great. Then I'm done with my questions. Was there anything I didn't ask what you would have wished me to ask? Any topic I didn't cover?
No, I think we covered a bunch of topics. No, I think we're good. We covered a lot of stuff, and it was really interesting. And I hope people will find it really interesting as well.
If people want to find out more about you, where can they contact you?
Sure. So you can find me on social media everywhere at Low Carb Rob, carb as in carbohydrate, or you can find me if you go to robj.me. That's my website. I think all the social media links are there. You can find me on LinkedIn. Yeah, I mean, basically anywhere that you can find people, I'm probably there. Otherwise, go onto the website, or if you really, really want to get in touch with me, you can email me at rob@coffeeandcodingpod.com.
Okay, nice. Of course, I will put all these links into the show notes, and yeah, people can follow that. Then I thank you for coming into the show, and I wish you a nice rest of the day.
Yeah, likewise. And thank you very much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Coding and Flow podcast. If you enjoyed this show, please subscribe either on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, please also leave a like on this video and leave a comment below with any suggestions, any input, any opinions on this topic. I actually read all of my comments. I don't respond to all of them because I can't, but I read every single one of them. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please also leave a 5-star rating if you think the show deserves it. And I've just recently set up a Patreon account where you can support the show if you want. You don't have to, of course, it's all voluntary. You can find the account under patreon.com/codingandflow. My name is Florian Walter, and you can find me on most social media platforms, including Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, under the handle @codingandflow. That's just one word, @codinginflow. And I also invite you to join our free Discord community, which is a great place to discuss programming topics and even off-topic stuff with thousands of other developers. You can find this community under codinginflow.com/discord. And last but not least, do you want to have a summary of these podcast episodes with my key insights straight to your email inbox for free, of course? Then you can join my newsletter, which you can find under codinginflow.com/newsletter. This is a great way to get the most important information out of these podcast episodes without having to watch all of them, because I know time is scarce and some of these episodes are really long. This is why I send these summaries to my email newsletter, so I hope you find this useful. Again, I thank you for listening to this episode. I hope we see us again in the next one. Take care and happy coding.
Coding.